They mocked the boy in the wheelchair at school. Years later, they knelt begging for help. Michael Reynolds felt his heart race as he tried to gather his notebooks scattered across the floor. Around him, laughter echoed like a cruel symphony that seemed endless. His fingers trembled, not from the difficulty of reaching the objects, but from the pain those laughs caused in his chest. "Look, the cripple's gonna need help again," said Brandon Thompson, the tallest of the four boys surrounding him. He kicked one of the notebooks away, making the others laugh even louder. Michael didn't look up. He'd already learned that looking at them only made things worse. He kept straining to reach his belongings, his wheelchair feeling like a cage he couldn't escape at that moment. "Hey, let me help you," said Tyler Johnson, bending down as if to pick up one of the books. But instead, he pushed another down the stairs. The sound of the book hitting the steps made Michael squeeze his eyes shut. Across the yard, hidden behind a pillar, Karen Reynolds watched the scene with a broken heart. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't let fall, not there, not at that moment. Her hands gripped the bucket and floor cloth so tightly her fingers turned white. She wanted to run to her son, wanted to yell at those boys, wanted to protect Michael like any mother would, but she couldn't. The janitorial position at Lincoln Middle School was all she had. It paid the bills, Michael's physical therapy, the medicine, the food. Losing that job would mean losing everything, and she knew exactly what would happen if she confronted the children of the town's most important families. "Come on, guys, that's enough," said Jason Miller, the only one of the four who occasionally showed some embarrassment. But his voice was too quiet, too weak to make any difference. "Shut up, Jason," replied Nathan Wilson, shoving his friend's shoulder. "You turning soft too? Gonna end up like the cripple." Michael finally managed to gather most of his materials. He put everything on his lap and started turning the wheels of his chair to move away. But Brandon stepped on one of the wheels, making the chair stop abruptly. "Leaving already? We were just playing," said Brandon with a smile that held no friendliness. "Let me pass," murmured Michael, still not looking up. "Didn't hear you. Speak up, cripple." "I said let me pass." Brandon removed his foot from the wheel, but not before giving the chair one last push, making Michael almost lose his balance and drop his notebooks again. The laughter started up again as Michael moved away as fast as he could. Karen waited for the boys to leave before coming out from behind the pillar. She went to the stairs, picked up the book that had been kicked, and tucked it into her apron. Then she continued cleaning the floor as if nothing had happened, every movement filled with a pain only a mother could understand. That evening, Michael was sitting at the table in the small kitchen of his home, a simple housing unit on the outskirts of Three Rivers in rural Pennsylvania. He had opened his math and science books, but he couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page, replaced by the laughter that still echoed in his mind. "Son, have you had dinner yet?" asked Karen, entering the kitchen, still wearing her work uniform. "I'm not hungry, Mom." "Michael, you need to eat. You have physical therapy tomorrow." "I know." Karen approached and saw that her son's eyes were red. She knew that look. She sat beside him and placed her hand over his. "It happened again today, didn't it?" Michael didn't answer, but he didn't need to. His silence said it all. "Son, I know it's hard, but—" "You saw, Mom." Michael interrupted her, his voice finally breaking. "I know you were there. I saw you behind the column." Karen felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. "I understand why you didn't do anything," continued Michael, now with tears streaming down his face. "I know you need this job. I'm not angry with you, Mom. I just wished things were different." Karen pulled her son into a tight hug, letting her own tears finally fall. "I'm sorry, my son. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, but I promise, one day things will change. You're so smart, so strong. One day they'll see that." "When, Mom? When will that happen?" It was a question Karen didn't know how to answer. She just held her son tighter, wishing she had the power to change the world for him. The next day, school seemed even more oppressive to Michael. He entered through the main gates, trying to make himself as invisible as possible, but it was hard to go unnoticed when you were in a wheelchair. All eyes turned to him, some with pity, others with contempt, and the worst with that morbid curiosity that made Michael want to disappear. The first class was math with Professor Richard, a man in his 50s who at least treated Michael with dignity. Michael liked math. It was a subject where the answers were right or wrong, no middle ground, no room for cruelty or judgment. The numbers didn't care about his legs, that didn't work. Today we're going to talk about spatial geometry, announced Professor Richard, writing on the board. Can anyone tell me the practical application of this in the real world? Silence. As always, no one wanted to answer. Michael timidly raised his hand. Yes, Michael? Spatial geometry is used in architecture and engineering. For example, to calculate accessibility ramps, you need to understand angles and proportions to ensure people in wheelchairs can go up without difficulty. Some students laughed softly. Michael felt his face grow warm. Excellent answer, Michael, said Professor Richard, giving a stern look to those who had laughed. That's exactly the kind of practical application that makes math so important. But Michael barely heard the praise. He already knew what would come after class. Recess was always the worst part of the day. Michael usually tried to stay in the library, where the presence of the librarian, Mrs. Patterson, a lady with grey hair and thick glasses, offered some protection. But today the library was closed for reorganization. He decided to stay near the teacher's lounge, hoping the proximity to adults would keep trouble away. But he was wrong. "Look who's here," said Brandon, appearing from behind a column with his 3 friends. The math genius. "Let me pass," said Michael, trying to keep his voice steady. "You know, I was thinking," continued Brandon, blocking Michael's way. "It's not fair you get all these advantages just because you can't walk." "What advantages?" Michael couldn't help asking, even though he knew it was better to stay quiet. "Well, you get to go first in lines, you always get the best parking spots when your mum picks you up, the teachers go easy on you. Must be nice to use that to get things, huh?" Michael felt anger boiling inside him, anger at being reduced to just his wheelchair, anger at them thinking his life was easy, anger at not being able to defend himself. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't choose to be in this chair." "Oh, are you going to cry now?" mocked Tyler. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, it was at that moment that a new voice intervened. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned to see a young man, looking about 30 years old, with a briefcase in hand and a serious expression on his face. Michael didn't know him, but by his appearance he seemed to be a new teacher. "Nothing, sir," Brandon said quickly, his posture completely changing. "We were just talking." "It didn't seem like just talking to me," the man said, looking from Brandon to Michael. "You are?" "Brandon Thompson, sir. Tyler Johnson, Jason Miller, Nathan Wilson." The teacher wrote down the names in a small notebook he took from his pocket. Then he looked at Michael. "And you?" "Michael Reynolds, sir." "Are you okay, Michael?" Michael hesitated. He wanted to say no, that nothing was okay, that those boys made his life hell every day. But he saw the warning look on Brandon's face and thought of his mother working at the school. "Yes, sir, everything's fine." The teacher clearly didn't believe it, but didn't press further in front of the others. "All right, you 4 can go. Michael, could you stay a moment?" The 4 boys walked away, but not before Brandon shot Michael a look that clearly said, "You'll pay for this." When they were alone, the teacher crouched down beside Michael's chair to be at eye level with him. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm the new physics teacher. I started this week. Were those boys bothering you?" "No, sir. Like I said, we were just talking." Daniel sighed. He clearly knew Michael was lying, but also seemed to understand why. "I see, but if you ever need to talk, my room is 204. There's always fresh coffee, and no one needs to know about our conversation. Deal?" Michael nodded, unsure whether he could trust this man. Teachers came and went, but Brandon and his friends would always be there. That afternoon, during the physical education class from which Michael was excused, he stayed alone in the classroom working on a science project. It was about urban accessibility, a topic he knew all too well from personal experience. He was so focused on his calculations that he didn't notice when the door opened and someone came in. He only noticed the presence when a shadow fell over his notebook. It was Nathan Wilson, alone this time. "I thought you were in PE class," said Michael, his heart already starting to race. "They let us out early," Nathan replied, sitting at the desk in front of Michael. There was something different in his tone, less aggressive than usual. Michael waited, tense, prepared for another humiliation. "Look, I know we're jerks to you," Nathan said, completely surprising Michael. "Especially Brandon. He's the worst of us all." Michael didn't know what to say. This had to be some kind of trap. "But I wanted you to know that—" Nathan hesitated, seeming to struggle with himself. Forget it. It doesn't matter." He got up and headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. "Just be careful, okay? Brandon is planning something. I don't know what, but he's furious that the new teacher intervened today. Just keep your eyes open." And with that, Nathan left, leaving Michael even more confused than before. That evening, Michael told his mother about Professor Daniel and Nathan's strange warning. "Do you think you can trust this new teacher?" asked Karen as she prepared dinner. "I don't know, Mum, but he seemed different from the others." "And this Nathan, why do you think he warned you?" Michael shook his head. He was trying to figure that out too. Karen stopped what she was doing and sat down next to her son. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I wasn't sure about speaking up, but I think you deserve to know." "What is it, Mum?" "I overheard a conversation today in the teacher's lounge. The principal was talking to some parents on the phone. It was Brandon's parents. They were complaining about the new teacher, saying he was targeting their son for no reason." Michael felt a chill in his stomach. "And what did the principal say?" "She assured them she would talk to the teacher. Michael, I'm afraid of what this means. The Thompson family is very influential here. Brandon's father owns several stores in town. If he wants to cause trouble for this teacher—" The sentence hung in the air, but they both understood what she meant. The next morning, Michael arrived early at school. He wanted to speak with Professor Daniel before it was too late. He found him in room 204, as he had said, preparing materials for the day's lessons. "Michael." Daniel seemed genuinely happy to see him. "Come in, please. Want some coffee?" "Oh, wait. You're too young for coffee. I have hot chocolate." "Professor, I need to talk to you about yesterday." Daniel's smile faded a bit, but he motioned for Michael to continue. "Those boys, Brandon especially, they do this every day. They humiliate me, destroy my things, make my life impossible. And I know his family is important and that you might have problems if you keep trying to help me." Daniel sat down in a chair, coming to Michael's eye level. "Are you telling me to ignore the bullying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to lose your job because of me. I've seen it happen before. A teacher tried to help and was transferred the next semester." "And you think that's fair?" "No, but it's reality." Daniel stayed silent for a long moment. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket. "Michael, can I show you something?" He opened a folder of videos and showed Michael. It was a discreet recording, filmed from inside Daniel's shirt pocket, but you could clearly see Brandon and his friends surrounding Michael in the courtyard. Michael turned pale. "Professor, you can't use that. If they find out you're recording—" "I know the risks, but I can't just stand by and watch this happen. I have this video and 3 more of similar situations, all from the last 3 days. What do you plan to do?" "I don't know yet, but if they want to fire me for protecting a student, then at least I'll make sure the truth comes out." Michael wanted to feel hopeful, but all he felt was fear. Fear of what Brandon would do when he found out. Fear of what would happen to the teacher. Fear of what would happen to his mother if everything came to light. "Professor, please, let it go. I can handle it. I only have 2 years left until I graduate and leave this place." 2 years is too long to endure that kind of abuse, Michael. But it's better than ruining everyone's lives trying to change something that won't change. The bell rang, signaling the start of classes. Michael started to leave the room, but Daniel called him. "Michael, wait. I understand your fear, but I promise I'll be careful. I won't do anything without thinking about the consequences, okay?" Michael nodded, but he didn't feel the least bit relieved. The following days were tense. Brandon and his friends seemed to sense that something was different. They kept their distance from Michael whenever Professor Daniel was around, but made up for it with doubled cruelty when he wasn't. On Thursday of that week, Michael was in the library during break when Nathan approached him again. This time he seemed nervous, looking around as if afraid of being seen. "I need to talk to you," he whispered. "About what?" "About Brandon. He found out the new teacher was recording you guys." Michael felt his stomach drop. How did he find out? His father saw the teacher on his phone in the principal's office and got suspicious. He managed to get the secretary to check the phone when the teacher stepped out to take a call. Now they're planning to sue the teacher for invasion of privacy and unauthorized recording. But the teacher was protecting a student. Doesn't matter. By law, he can't record anyone without permission, especially minors. Lucas's father has already contacted a lawyer. The teacher will be fired by the end of the week. Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. Daniel had tried to help him and now was going to lose his job over it. "There's more," Nathan continued, his voice even lower. "After they get rid of the teacher, Lucas's father is going to have your mother fired too. He thinks she's the one who told the teacher about the bullying." "No," Michael said too loudly. Mrs. Patterson looked at them disapprovingly. In a lower voice, he continued, "My mother had nothing to do with this. She didn't even know the teacher was recording." "I know. But Lucas's father doesn't care. He wants to make an example, show that nobody messes with his family." Michael felt tears of anger and frustration burning his eyes. "Why are you telling me this? Why do you care?" Nathan seemed uncomfortable with the question. "Because I have a younger brother. He's 7 years old and was born with a heart condition. He's fragile, you know. And every time I see us doing these things to you, I think about my brother. What it would be like if someone did that to him when he's older." It was the first time Michael had seen any trace of humanity in any of his tormentors. "Then why don't you stop? Why don't you and Jason say something?" "Because Lucas has been my best friend since we were little, and Tyler too. And if I go against them, I'll be alone. You don't understand this pressure." "Actually, I understand better than you think," Michael said bitterly. Nathan nodded, acknowledging the truth of that. Then he left the library as quietly as he had entered. Michael remained seated there, his mind racing. He needed to do something. He needed to warn Professor Daniel. He needed to protect his mother. But how? He was just a 15-year-old boy in a wheelchair against powerful families and a system that clearly wasn't on his side. That afternoon after classes, Michael went to room 204. Professor Daniel was packing his materials into boxes. "Professor," Michael began, but his voice failed him at the sight. Daniel turned and Michael saw his eyes were red. "Oh, Michael, I was going to look for you before leaving." "So it's true they're firing you?" Daniel gave a sad smile. "Not exactly. They're transferring me to another school, out in the country, far from here. The principal said it's a better opportunity, but we both know what it really is. And the videos? I was forced to delete everything. They threatened to sue not just me, but also my wife and our newborn daughter. They said they could make accusations of much worse things if I didn't cooperate." Michael felt as if he'd been punched. "And my mother?" Daniel lowered his gaze. "Michael, I'm sorry. I tried to negotiate. I told them she had nothing to do with it, that it was just me. But they want to make an example. They said your mother will be fired tomorrow." The tears Michael had been holding back finally fell. His mother was going to lose her job. They wouldn't have money for physical therapy anymore. All his hopes of improving, of maybe one day walking with crutches, all of it was ending. "I ruined everything," Michael whispered. "No." Daniel crouched in front of him. "You did nothing wrong. I made a choice. I knew the risks and decided to try to help anyway. The mistake isn't yours or mine. The mistake lies with a system that protects aggressors instead of victims. But that doesn't change anything, does it? In the end, they win." Daniel held Michael's shoulders. "For now, yes. But you're smart, Michael. Smarter than any of those boys. Use that intelligence, study, grow. And one day, when you're strong enough, make a difference so other children don't have to go through what you're going through." Michael nodded, but he couldn't see how anything good could come from all this. Daniel took a card from his pocket and handed it to Michael. "This is my personal email. If you need anything, A recommendation, help with studies, someone to talk to, you can write to me. I promise I'll respond." Michael took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you, Professor, for trying." "Don't thank me, just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't give up. Don't let them win in the end. Keep studying. Keep growing. Prove that you're bigger than anything they tried to do to you." That night was one of the worst in Michael's life. He had to tell his mother what had happened. Karen didn't cry in front of him. She stayed strong, saying they would figure it out, that she would find another job. But Michael heard her crying in the bathroom after she thought he was asleep. On Friday, when Karen went to work, the principal called her for a meeting. Michael knew what was going to happen. He went to school that day carrying a weight in his chest that seemed impossible to bear. During the first class, he barely paid attention. His mind was with his mother, imagining the humiliation she must be going through at that moment. All because of him. If he weren't disabled, if he could defend himself, none of this would have happened. It was during recess that things got even worse. Michael was near the court when Brandon and his friends surrounded him. This time there was a different cruelty in their eyes, a satisfaction that made Michael's stomach turn. "So, Cripple heard the news?" asked Brandon, a nasty smile on his face. "Your mommy got fired this morning. I bet now you won't even have money for those little wheels of yours." Michael clenched his fists on the armrests of his chair. "You ruined her life. Why? What did she ever do to you?" "She should have taught her son to know his place," Brandon replied. "But don't worry. This is just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Brandon leaned down, face to face with Michael. "We're going to make your life so miserable you'll beg to leave this school. And with no money for physical therapy, maybe you'll be stuck in that chair forever. That would be a shame, wouldn't it?" Something broke inside Michael at that moment. All the pain, all the anger, all the frustration he had been storing up exploded. Without thinking about what he was doing, he gave Brandon a hard shove in the chest, catching the boy by surprise and making him stumble backward. For a second, everyone froze. Then Brandon's expression shifted from surprise to pure fury. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. But before he could do anything, an authoritative voice cut through the air. "What's going on here?" It was Principal Barbara Jenkins, a woman in her 50s with hair pulled back in a severe bun and an expression that tolerated no disorder. "Nothing, Principal," Brandon said quickly, his expression changing to that of an innocent boy. "Michael just accidentally bumped into me." Michael could hardly believe the audacity, but what shocked him more was that the principal seemed to accept the explanation without question. "Michael, come with me," she said. "We need to talk." Michael followed the principal to her office, his heart pounding. He knew what was coming. They were going to blame him for pushing Brandon. They were going to use it as an excuse to expel him from school. And then he wouldn't even have his education to hold on to. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Inside the principal's office, Michael found his mother already waiting, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mom," he whispered, but Karen just shook her head, unable to speak. Principal Barbara sat behind her desk, her hands folded on the polished surface. "Mrs. Karen, as we discussed this morning, your dismissal has become necessary due to budget cuts at the school. It has nothing to do with your performance. It was a blatant lie, and everyone in the room knew it." "And Michael," the principal turned to him, "I heard you physically assaulted Brandon Thompson today during recess. He provoked me. He said horrible things about my mom. Regardless of what was said, physical violence is not tolerated at this school. You understand that, don't you?" Michael felt tears of anger burning his eyes. "And what they do to me every day, isn't that violence too? If you're being bullied, you should have reported it to the teachers or to me. I tried, several times, but no one does anything because his family is rich and important." The principal sighed, as if Michael was being difficult on purpose. "Michael, I'll be frank with you. The Thompson family is one of the biggest donors to this school. Without their support and that of other important families, this school couldn't function. Now they are very upset about today's incident and the accusations you and that teacher made against their son." "Accusations? They were truths. Truths that can't be proven since the videos were deleted, and now you physically assaulted the boy. That I have witnesses to confirm. Michael realized there was no way out. They had built the trap perfectly. What's going to happen to me? You're suspended for 2 weeks. If there's any further incident when you return, you will be expelled permanently. Karen finally found her voice. Please, Principal. My son is already going through so much. This suspension will hurt his grades, his future. The decision has already been made. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. Mother and son left the school that day carrying the weight of defeat. On the way home, Karen tried to be strong, making plans for the future. But Michael barely heard her. Everything seemed to have lost its meaning. When they got home, Michael went straight to his room. He looked at the books scattered on the desk, at the science projects he was developing, at all the dreams he had built for his future. And for the first time in his life, he thought about giving up on everything. That night he didn't touch the dinner his mother had prepared. He didn't open any books. He just lay in the dark, letting despair consume him. But then, in the early hours of the morning, when the sun was starting to rise and Michael still hadn't managed to sleep, he remembered Professor Daniel's words. Keep studying, keep growing. Prove that you're bigger than anything they've tried to do to you. Slowly, Michael turned on the lamp next to his bed. He picked up the card Daniel had given him and looked at the email written there. Then he grabbed his old laptop, a birthday gift from 2 years ago, and started writing. Professor Daniel, I know you just left the school, but I need a favor. You said if I needed help with my studies, I could write. Well, I'm writing. I've been suspended for 2 weeks. My mom was fired. We won't have money for my physical therapy anymore. It seems like everything is falling apart, but I've made a decision. I won't let them win. I won't give up on school. I won't give up on my dreams. I'm going to use these 2 weeks of suspension to study harder than ever. Could you send me physics materials, exercises, videos, anything that could help me advance? I want to prepare for the Science Olympics happening in 3 months, and after that, I'm going to apply for every scholarship I can find. I'll prove I'm more than they think. I'll show that no matter how many times they try to knock me down, I'll always get back up. Thank you for trying to help me, Professor. You were the first adult at school who really cared. Michael Reynolds. He clicked send and for the first time in days felt a small spark of hope. Daniel's response arrived before breakfast. Michael, your email filled me with pride and admiration. It's this inner strength that will take you far. I'm attaching all the first-year high school physics materials, plus some advanced exercises. I'll also send you links to some free online courses about engineering and accessibility. Regarding the Science Olympics, I know the teacher who organizes the regional competition here. I'll contact her and mention your situation. She's a fair woman who values merit above all. But Michael, I want you to know something. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're already amazing just as you are. If you want to pursue these achievements, let it be for yourself, for your own dreams. Don't let anger or the need for revenge dictate your choices. That will only consume you. Do it because you love knowledge. Do it because you want to build a better world. Do it because that's who you are. I'll always be here whenever you need me. Professor Daniel Carter. Michael read and reread that message. The professor's words touched something deep inside him. Daniel was right. He needed to do this for himself, not because of Brandon and his friends. The 2 weeks of suspension became a period of transformation for Michael. He woke up at 6 every morning and studied late into the night. His mother, despite her worries about their future, saw her son's determination and felt a mix of pride and sadness. Karen had gone out every day looking for work, but the news of her dismissal from the school had spread through the small town. Everyone knew she had been let go by the Thompson family, and nobody wanted to risk crossing them by hiring her. Michael, we need to talk, she said one evening, sitting beside him at the kitchen table where he studied. About what, Mom? About money, about our future. Son, I found a job, but it's in Blue Ridge. We'll have to move. Michael looked up from his books, surprised. But what about school? I have to go back in a week. You'll have to transfer. It'll be a fresh start for both of us, a chance to leave all this behind. Michael remained silent for a long moment. Part of him wanted to take that way out, to escape that town and all the bad memories, but another part, the part that had awakened the day after the suspension, didn't want to run away. "Mum, what if I don't want to go?" Karen looked confused. "What do you mean?" "What if I want to stay? What if I want to go back to that school and show them all they can't break me?" "Michael, son, I understand your pride, but sometimes the best decision is knowing when to step back. There's no shame in that." "It's not about pride, Mom. It's about not letting them think they've won. Besides, the Science Olympics are in 3 months. If I move now, I won't be able to participate." Karen looked at her son, seeing in him a maturity that shouldn't exist in a 15-year-old boy. "What if things get worse when you go back? Then I'll deal with it, but at least I'll try." "Mum, you always taught me not to run away from my problems. That's what I learned from watching you work 2 shifts to raise me alone after Dad left us." Tears filled Karen's eyes. She pulled her son into a tight hug. "Okay, we'll stay, but on one condition: the moment things become unbearable, the moment I feel it's harming you, we leave." "Agreed." "Agreed." Karen took the job at a laundromat in Blue Ridge, but managed to negotiate working only 3 days a week, traveling by bus. On the other days, she cleaned private homes in 3 Rivers. It was exhausting, but it paid the basic bills. Michael's physical therapy, however, had to be stopped. When Michael returned to school after the suspension, he expected to find more hostility, more bullying. And in part he was right. Brandon and his friends were there with their malicious smiles and their taunts, but something had changed in Michael. He no longer reacted. He didn't hang his head in shame, but he didn't retaliate with anger either. He simply kept walking, his eyes fixed on his goals. It was as if he had built an invisible armor around himself. This seemed to make Brandon even more furious. Michael's lack of reaction frustrated him in a way no angry response ever could. "Hey, cripple, you ignoring me now?" Brandon shouted one day in the hallway. Michael stopped, turned his wheelchair, and looked directly at Brandon. "I have more important things to worry about than you, Brandon. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to study." And he continued on his way, leaving Brandon standing there, unsure how to react. It was Nathan who approached Michael again a few weeks later. "Dude, what happened to you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "What do you mean?" "You're different. Before you'd get angry, cry, react. Now it's like nothing we do affects you." Michael gave a small smile. "I realized your anger says more about you than it does about me, and that I have a choice about whether or not to let it affect me." Nathan was silent for a moment. "You know, I never thought about it that way." "Maybe you should." Nathan nodded slowly. "Jason's been saying the same thing, that we're going too far." "And what do you think?" I think my little brother would be ashamed of me if he knew what I do." It was a surprising admission, and Michael wasn't quite sure what to do with it. "Then maybe it's time to stop," Michael said simply. "It's not that easy. Brandon and Tyler, they don't own you, Nathan. You're responsible for your own choices." Nathan seemed to ponder this before walking away, leaving Michael thinking that perhaps, just perhaps, things could change. The following months were intense. Michael dedicated himself completely to his studies, especially his project for the science fair. He was developing a prototype for an adaptable ramp that could be installed on any staircase, using a system of hinges and locks that would make public buildings more accessible at a much lower cost than traditional ramps. It was an ambitious project, especially for a 15-year-old student with limited resources. But Michael was determined. He spent every afternoon at the public library, researching, doing calculations, drawing schematics. It was during one of these afternoons at the library that he met Harriet Williams, a woman in her 60s who volunteered there. Harriet had well-kept grey hair and a kind smile that reminded Michael of his late grandmother. "That's a very impressive project," she said one day, peeking over Michael's shoulder. "Are you doing this for school?" "For the science fair," Michael replied, a little embarrassed at being caught so deep in concentration. "The science fair, that's wonderful. You know, my husband was a civil engineer before he passed away. He would have loved to see a young person interested in accessibility." Harriet and Michael began talking regularly. She would tell stories about her husband, about the projects he had developed, about how he always said that true engineering was what improved people's lives. "You remind me so much of him," Harriet said one day. That same passion for solving real problems. Michael felt a warmth in his chest from the compliment. "Mrs. Patterson, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. How do you deal with the loss? Of your husband, I mean." Harriet fell silent for a moment, her eyes filling with tears she didn't try to hide. "There's no easy way, Michael. Some days are harder than others. But I've learned that the best way to honor those we've lost is to keep living in a way that would make them proud. My husband spent his life building bridges, roads, ramps. So I work here helping people build bridges of knowledge." Michael understood what she meant. It was similar to what he was trying to do, honoring his mother's struggle, honoring Professor Daniel's efforts, by building something bigger than himself. It was Harriet who helped him understand that his project needed a physical model, not just drawings. And it was she who introduced him to old Joe, a retired carpenter who frequented the library and had a small workshop at home. Old Joe was a man in his 70s, of few words but skilled hands. When Harriet explained Michael's project, his eyes sparkled with interest. "This boy wants to make a folding ramp." "Interesting. Come here tomorrow after school, kid. Let's see what we can do." Michael could hardly believe his luck. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, it seemed like things were starting to come together. Working with old Joe was a transformative experience. The old carpenter didn't have Michael's formal education, but he had decades of practical knowledge about materials, strength, balance. "You see, kid," he would say while cutting a piece of wood, "you can have all the calculations in the world, but if you don't understand how the material behaves in real life, your project won't work." Michael absorbed every word like a sponge. He spent weeks going to old Joe's workshop every day after school, working on the prototype. His mother worried about him coming home late, but when she saw the joy in her son's eyes, she couldn't bring herself to forbid it. It was during this period that Jason, one of the 4 who used to bully Michael, showed up at the workshop one day. "What are you doing here?" asked Michael, surprised and a bit defensive. Jason looked ashamed. I heard you were working on a science project. I wanted to see." Michael looked at old Joe, who just shrugged, leaving the decision to him. "All right, come in." Jason was visibly impressed with the prototype. "Dude, this is amazing. You did all this by yourself." "Old Joe, Mrs. Patterson from the library and I have been working on it." Can I help with anything?" Michael hadn't expected that. "Why?" Jason took a deep breath. "Because I feel terrible about everything we did to you. Nathan has talked to me several times about it. And he's right. We're jerks. What about Brandon and Tyler? They haven't changed, but I'm tired of being like them." Michael pondered that. Part of him wanted to send Jason away, to say it was too late to try and fix things, but another part remembered what Mrs. Patterson had said about building bridges. "Do you know how to handle tools?" asked Michael. "A little. My uncle has an auto shop. I help him sometimes." "Then yes, you can help. I need someone to sand these pieces here." And so, unlikely as it seemed, Jason began helping with the project. At first they worked in awkward silence, but gradually they started talking. "Can I ask you something?" Jason said one day. "Why do you forgive us so easily? Me and Nathan, I mean." Michael stopped what he was doing and thought carefully before answering. "It's not easy, forgiveness. It still hurts to think about everything you did. But I realized that carrying anger was only hurting me, and you're trying to change. That counts for something." Jason nodded, his eyes glistening. "I promise I'll be better, Michael. I'll be the kind of person my parents think I am." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Nathan also started showing up at the workshop, first just to observe, then to help. The 3 worked together on the prototype, and Michael realized he was creating something more important than a ramp. He was building friendships, something he never imagined possible with those boys. But not everything was peaceful. Brandon and Tyler, feeling they were losing their friends, intensified their attacks. The difference was that now Michael wasn't alone. Nathan and Jason stood by his side, and that made all the difference. One day in the school hallway, Brandon pushed Michael's wheelchair against the wall, as he usually did. But before he could say anything cruel, Nathan and Jason stepped between them. "That's enough, Brandon," said Nathan, his voice firm. "What? You're defending the cripple now?" Brandon seemed incredulous. "We're defending our friend," corrected Jason. "Friend?" Brandon laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Have you gone crazy?" "No. We woke up," replied Nathan. "And it's time for you to wake up too. What we do to Michael is wrong. It always has been. And we're not going to be part of it anymore." Brandon looked from Nathan to Jason, then to Michael, who remained calm in his chair. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "My father can make your lives impossible." "Then let him," replied Nathan. "At least we'll sleep with a clear conscience." Brandon left furiously, taking Tyler with him. Michael, Nathan, and Jason stood there, still processing what had happened. "Thank you," said Michael, his voice choked with emotion. "No need to thank us," replied Nathan. "We should have done that a long time ago." The following weeks were tense. Brandon and Tyler spread rumors about the three, tried to isolate them socially, even tried to sabotage Michael's project by spilling water on his notebooks during recess. But each attack only strengthened the friendship between Michael, Nathan, and Jason. Finally, the day of the Science Olympics arrived. The regional competition was being held in Greenfield, a neighboring town, and Michael, with his carefully packed prototype, traveled there with his mother, Old Joe, Mrs. Williams, Nathan, and Jason. The gym where the event took place was full of students from all over the region, each with their projects. Michael looked around, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Are you ready, son?" asked Karen, squeezing his shoulder. "I think so. No, wait, I'm terrified." Everyone laughed, easing the tension a bit. "You're going to be amazing," said Mrs. Williams. "This project is extraordinary." "And if the judges don't think so?" "Then they're idiots," said Old Joe, with his characteristic frankness, making everyone laugh again. Michael was the 15th to present. When they called his name, he felt his heart race. Nathan and Jason helped him position the prototype on the presentation table. The three judges were university professors from different fields: engineering, physics, and design. They looked at Michael with interest as he began his presentation. "Gentlemen, my name is Michael Reynolds, and my project is called the Low-Cost Adaptive Ramp System. In the United States, most public buildings are not accessible for people with disabilities. Permanent ramps are expensive and often impossible to install in older buildings due to space constraints. My project proposes a solution, a ramp that can be folded and stored when not in use but is strong and safe when open." Michael demonstrated the prototype, explaining the weight calculations, strength, and angle of inclination. He talked about the materials he chose for being cheap and durable. He showed how the ramp could be installed and removed in less than a minute. The judges asked questions, some of them quite technical. Michael answered them all, his confidence growing with each response. He wasn't just a boy in a wheelchair. He was a scientist, an engineer, someone trying to solve a real problem. When he finished, the judges thanked him, and he returned to where his family and friends were waiting. "That was amazing, Michael," exclaimed Jason. "You explained everything so well," added Nathan. His mother just hugged him tightly, tears of pride streaming down her face. They had to wait until the end of the day for the results. Michael watched the other presentations, impressed by his peers' creativity and intelligence. There were projects on solar energy, water purification, sustainable agriculture, each one brilliant in its own way. When it was time to announce the winners, Michael felt his stomach churn. In third place began the jury president, a physics teacher with grey hair and round glasses. The project on efficient photovoltaic cells by Madison Scott. Applause. Michael clapped along, happy for the girl who had presented a truly impressive project on solar energy. In second place, the water filtration system using recycled materials by Brian Cooper. More applause. Michael felt Nathan squeeze his shoulder, a gesture of support. And in first place? Michael closed his eyes. It didn't matter if he won or not, he had already won by getting there. The Low-Cost Adaptive Ramp System by Michael Reynolds. For a second, Michael couldn't process what he had heard. Then the gym erupted in applause. His mother screamed with joy. Mrs. Harriet and old Joe hugged each other, and Nathan and Jason raised their arms in celebration. Michael went up to the stage to receive his certificate and a full scholarship to any public university in the state. The jury president asked for silence to speak. "I want to say something about this winning project. What impressed me most wasn't just the technical excellence, although it's certainly there. It was the empathy. Michael created something not to win a prize, but to genuinely improve the lives of people facing the same challenges as him. And that, my young friends, is the true spirit of science, solving real problems, helping real people. Congratulations, Michael." That night they celebrated at a simple pizza place in Greenfield. Michael could hardly stop smiling. He had proven, first to himself and then to the world, that he was capable of amazing things. "Son, I'm so proud of you," said Karen, holding his hand across the table. "Your father would have been proud too." It was rare for her to mention Michael's father, who had left them when Michael was just 3 years old, right after the accident that left him paraplegic. But at that moment she felt it was important to say, "Thank you, Mom, but I didn't do it for him. I did it for you, for me, for all the people who are treated as if they're less because of a disability." Old Joe raised his glass of soda. "A toast to Michael, who taught me that an old carpenter still has much to learn. And to Michael, who reminded me why I fell in love with science," said Mrs. Harriet. "To Michael, who showed me what true courage means," said Nathan. "And to our friend who taught us how to be better people," concluded Jason. Michael felt tears of happiness streaming down his face. After everything he had been through, after all the pain and humiliation, he had found not only success but also friendship, community, purpose. But the story was far from over. When they returned to Three Rivers, news of Michael's victory at the competition had already spread. To Michael's surprise, the school organized a small ceremony in his honor. Principal Barbara, the same one who had suspended him months earlier, now beamed as she congratulated him in front of all the students. Michael felt a twinge of bitterness at the hypocrisy, but decided to accept the recognition gracefully. After all, perhaps it meant that other students with disabilities would be treated better in the future. Brandon and Tyler were in the audience, their faces like thunder. Seeing Michael celebrated by the entire school was clearly unbearable for them. But there was nothing they could do. Michael had become, almost overnight, the most respected student in the school. The following months passed quickly. Michael began working with the university that had sponsored the competition to develop more advanced versions of his ramp. His story was published in the local newspaper, then in a state newspaper, and eventually made it to a national technology blog. With attention came opportunities. A company from Blue Ridge reached out, interested in licensing the patent for his design. They offered an amount that, by Michael and Karen's standards, was a fortune. "Mom, with this money you won't have to work so hard," said Michael, as they reviewed the proposal with a lawyer Mrs. Harriet had recommended. "Michael, this money is yours. It's the fruit of your work, your intelligence. It's ours, Mom. None of this would have been possible without you. You worked 2 jobs to support me, gave up everything for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Karen cried as she hugged her son. After years of struggle, it finally seemed like things were getting better. Michael used part of the money to resume his physical therapy, now with a private physical therapist specializing in complex cases. To his joy and surprise, he began to see progress he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't anything miraculous, but gradually, with daily exercises and determination, he started to gain more strength in his legs. During this period, Michael kept in regular contact with Professor Daniel via email. The professor had gotten married and was happy at his new school, but he always asked about Michael and celebrated each of his achievements. It was Daniel who suggested that Michael apply for a summer research program at a federal university. "You already have the project, you already have the recognition. What you need now is experience in a real academic environment," he wrote. Michael followed the advice and applied. To his delight, he was accepted. He would spend the summer after graduating high school working in a biomechanics lab in Chicago, but before he could get there, he still had to finish his senior year of high school. And it was during this final year that something unexpected happened. Brandon Thompson stopped coming to school in the middle of the first semester. Rumors circulated through the school, but no one knew exactly what had happened. Some said he had transferred to a private school in another town. Others said the family was going through financial troubles. The truth was more complicated. Michael found out from Nathan, who still kept in touch with the Thompson family through his parents. Brandon's father is being investigated for tax evasion, Nathan shared one afternoon while they studied together in the library. All his stores have been closed. The family is bankrupt. Michael felt no satisfaction from the news, just a strange emptiness. He had spent so much time hating Brandon, wishing something bad would happen to him. But now that it had, Michael only felt sad. Sad for all the time and emotional energy he had wasted on anger. "And Brandon, how is he doing?" Michael asked. Nathan seemed surprised by the question. "I don't know. We don't talk anymore. But I heard his mother is sick. Stress, I think. The whole situation was very sudden. I hope she gets better." Nathan looked at Michael with admiration. "Man, after everything he did to you, how can you still care about his family?" Michael shrugged. "I'm not sure I can explain it. But I've learned that holding grudges only poisoned myself. Besides, no one deserves to see their family suffer, not even Brandon." That conversation stayed with Michael for days. He thought about Brandon, about Tyler, about how their cruel actions probably came from their own insecurities and problems. It didn't justify what they had done, but at least it helped Michael understand. The year ended with Michael being chosen as the class speaker for graduation. On stage, wearing his best suit that Karen had bought for the occasion, he looked out at the audience filled with parents, teachers, and classmates. "When I started high school," he said, his voice echoing through the auditorium, "I thought I knew how the world worked. I thought I knew who the villains were and who the heroes were. But over these 3 years, I've learned that life is much more complex than that. I've learned that people can change. I've learned that kindness exists in the most unexpected places. I've learned that our circumstances don't define our future. Our choices do. I was lucky to find incredible mentors like Mrs. Harriet and Old Joe, dedicated teachers like Professor Daniel, and a mother who sacrificed everything for me. But above all, I've learned that true growth comes not from our victories, but from how we handle our defeats. So, to the class of 2023, I leave this challenge. Be kind, be courageous, and never let anyone tell you that you're not capable of achieving your dreams, no matter what difficulties you face." The audience rose in applause. Michael searched the crowd and found his mother crying with pride, Nathan and Jason waving at him, Mrs. Harriet and Old Joe smiling broadly. The following summer, Michael went to Chicago to participate in the research program. There he met other brilliant young scientists and had access to equipment and knowledge he had never imagined. He learned about robotic prosthetics, exoskeletons, and new technologies that were revolutionizing the lives of people with disabilities. It was also there that he met Professor Dr. Catherine Roberts, a renowned biomechanics researcher who became his mentor. Catherine was an impressive woman in her 50s who had lost a leg in a car accident in her youth and now used a state-of-the-art prosthesis. "Michael, you have real talent," she said one day, after he presented some ideas for improving exoskeleton designs. "Have you ever thought about getting a degree in biomedical engineering?" "I'd like to, but it's an expensive program, even with the scholarship I won. What if I told you we have a special program for talented students from low-income families? Full scholarship, plus a monthly stipend for housing and meals." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Really? Completely serious? You have exactly the kind of perspective we need in this field. Someone who understands users' needs because they're one of them. Want to apply?" "Yes, of course," Catherine smiled. "Great. I'll personally write your recommendation letter." And so, the following year, Michael moved to Chicago to study biomedical engineering at one of the country's best universities. Karen stayed in Three Rivers but visited whenever she could. With the money from the patent license, she had managed to buy a small house and open a small sustainable cleaning products business. Michael's university life was transformative. He excelled in all his subjects, always bringing a unique perspective to problems discussed in class. He also became active in disability rights advocacy groups, using his story to inspire others. During his second year at university, Michael met Amber Taylor, a design student who was also interested in assistive technology. Amber had a sister with cerebral palsy and deeply understood the challenges Michael had faced. They began working together on projects, combining Michael's technical knowledge with Amber's aesthetic eye. The partnership quickly turned into friendship and eventually into something more. "You know you're amazing, right?" said Amber one night as they worked late on a prototype in the lab. Michael smiled shyly. "I'm just a guy trying to make a difference." "No, you're much more than that. You're someone who took all the pain and injustice you suffered and turned it into something beautiful. That's rare." Michael felt his heart race. He had never allowed himself to think about romantic relationships, always thinking no one would see beyond his wheelchair. "Amber, You don't need to say anything now," she gently interrupted. "I just wanted you to know how I see you. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here." And she was. 6 months later, they officially started dating. Amber didn't see Michael's chair. She saw the extraordinary man he was. The undergraduate years passed in the blink of an eye. Michael graduated with honors and immediately entered the master's program, focusing on affordable exoskeletons. His master's thesis proposed a new exoskeleton design that could be manufactured for 1/10 the cost of existing models without sacrificing functionality. It was during his master's that life took an unexpected turn. Michael was at a conference in Blue Ridge presenting his research when a familiar figure approached him after his talk. He was older, thinner, with deep bags under his eyes. But Michael instantly recognized that face that had haunted his worst nightmares for years. Brandon Thompson. Michael felt his body automatically tense up. All the old memories came flooding back in a flash, the humiliations, the pain, the tears. But then he took a deep breath, remembering who he was now, how much he had grown. "Michael," said Brandon, his voice hesitant. Can I talk to you for a moment?" "Of course," Michael replied, surprising himself with the calm in his voice. They went to a quieter corner of the conference hall. Brandon seemed to be struggling to find words. "I saw your presentation. It's impressive what you're doing." "Thank you. Look, I know I have no right to show up here after everything, but I needed to tell you. I needed to apologize for what I did to you in school, for the hell I made your life." Michael studied Brandon's face. There was sincerity there, but also pain. Brandon had aged poorly in recent years. He looked tired, defeated. "What happened to you, Brandon? I heard your family went through some difficulties." Brandon gave a bitter laugh. "Difficulties is an understatement. My father was arrested for tax fraud. We lost everything. My mother had a stroke from the stress. She was paralyzed on her right side." Michael felt his heart tighten. "I'm sorry to hear that. And you know what the most ironic part is? Now I take care of her. I take her to physical therapy, help with the exercises, deal with all the frustrations and challenges of having limited mobility. And every day, every damn day, I think of you, about how I must have made you feel, and I hate myself for it." Tears were now streaming down Brandon's face. Michael stayed silent, letting the other man speak. "My mother needs an exoskeleton, Michael. The doctors say with one she could regain much of her mobility, but that equipment costs a fortune we no longer have. And then I saw you were here, presenting about affordable exoskeletons, and I thought, I don't know what I thought, that maybe the universe was giving me a chance to try and fix even just a little what I did." "You want me to help your mother?" asked Michael, his voice neutral. "I have no right to ask anything of you. But yes, if there's any possibility at all that you could help her, I'm begging you, not for me. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but for her, she did nothing wrong." Michael was silent for a long moment. He could feel years of anger, of pain, of resentment wanting to surface. It would be so easy to say no, to turn his back, to let Brandon feel a fraction of the helplessness he had made Michael feel. But then he thought of his own mother, of Mrs. Harriet, of old Joe, of everyone who had helped him when he needed it most, even though they owed him nothing. "What's her name?" Brandon blinked, surprised. "Your mother? What's her name?" Susan Thompson. "Have her come to my lab at the university next week. I'll evaluate her personally and see what I can do." "Michael, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just understand one thing. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And because I refuse to let the cruelty you showed in the past turn me into a cruel person too." Brandon nodded, still crying. "Thank you. And I really am sorry. For everything." "I know." When Michael told Amber about the encounter with Brandon, she was outraged. "You have no obligation to help him after everything he did." "I'm not helping him. I'm helping a woman who is suffering. She didn't choose to have a jerk for a son." "But Michael..." "Amber, I understand your anger. I'm angry too. But if I let that anger control me, if I refuse to help someone in need just out of pride or revenge, then how am I any different from him?" Amber held Michael's face in her hands. "You are too good for this world, you know that." "I'm not good. I'm just tired of carrying all this weight of anger. It's time to let it go." On the scheduled day, Susan Thompson arrived at the lab in a wheelchair pushed by Brandon. She was an elegant woman despite the circumstances, with neatly styled grey hair and a kind gaze. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is Michael Reynolds. It's a pleasure to meet you." Susan looked at him, then at her son, then back at Michael. "You're the boy from school?" "Yes, ma'am." "Brandon told me everything, about what he and his friends did. I didn't know. You have to believe me. If I had known back then..." "It's all right, ma'am. The past is in the past. Now let's focus on helping you, okay?" Michael spent the next 2 hours evaluating Susan, measuring her motor capabilities, discussing her needs and limitations with her. Brandon sat in a corner the whole time, watching silently. "Well," Michael said finally, "I believe I can create a custom exoskeleton for you. It'll take a few months, and it'll require you to come here regularly for adjustments and training. Can you do that?" "Yes," replied Susan, tears in her eyes. "But son, how much will it cost?" "We don't have..." "It costs nothing. You'll be part of a research project. In fact, I'm grateful for the opportunity to test my design in a real case." "Michael, this is... I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me. Just promise you'll follow all instructions and do the exercises I'll prescribe." In the following months, Michael worked tirelessly on Susan's exoskeleton. Amber helped with the aesthetic design, ensuring it didn't look like medical equipment, but something Susan could wear with dignity. Brandon came to every session, always quiet, always observing. Michael could see the change in him. The arrogant and cruel boy had disappeared, replaced by a humble man who was learning about empathy the hard way. During one session, while Susan rested, Brandon pulled Michael aside. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you doing this? Seriously, I need to understand. I made your life hell. I made you suffer for years. Why are you being so kind to my mother?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "Because when you go through something like what I went through, you have two choices. You can let it destroy you, turn you into someone bitter and full of anger, or you can use that experience to better understand others' suffering and become someone more compassionate. I chose the second path. I wish I had made better choices when I was younger. You can still make better choices now. It's not too late to change, Brandon." "How? How do I fix everything I did wrong?" "I don't know if you can fix it. The past is past, but you can learn from it. You can become a better person. You can make sure no other boy goes through what you put me through." Brandon nodded, discreetly wiping his eyes. "I'm studying psychology in college. I work part-time at an NGO that helps at-risk youth. I try to make some difference." "That's good, Brandon. Really it is. I wish we could be friends." "Could be, or at least not enemies, but I understand if that's never possible." Michael looked at Brandon, this broken man who had once been his worst nightmare. "I don't know if we'll ever be friends, Brandon. The scars are too deep for that, but maybe we can find a way to peace, for both of us to move forward." That would be more than I deserve. 3 months later, the day of the final exoskeleton test arrived. Susan entered the laboratory in her wheelchair, nervous but hopeful. All of Michael's research team was there, as well as Amber, Dr. Catherine, and even Karen, who had traveled from 3 Rivers for the occasion. Michael had also invited Nathan and Jason, who were now college students in other cities, but made sure to be present. "Mrs. Susan," said Michael, "are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." With Amber's help, they put the exoskeleton on Susan. It was an elegant structure of lightweight metal and durable plastic, painted a subtle dark blue at Susan's insistence. Sensors connected to her skin, reading her nerve impulses and translating them into movement. Michael activated the system, and for the first time in 3 years, Susan Thompson stood up from her chair. Tears immediately began streaming down her face. Brandon let out a sob. The entire room held its breath. I'm standing," whispered Susan, her voice breaking with emotion. "Now try taking a step," Michael instructed gently. "Don't force it. Let the equipment do most of the work." Susan took a trembling step, then another, and another. She was walking, slowly, carefully, but walking. "My God!" she laughed and cried at the same time. "I'm walking!" The room erupted in applause and tears. Karen hugged Dr. Catherine. Nathan and Jason were slapping Michael on the back. Amber just looked at her boyfriend with admiration and love. And Brandon had fallen to his knees, sobbing as he watched his mother take her first steps in years. Michael approached him and put a hand on his shoulder. "See? Sometimes good things happen, even after everything." Brandon looked at Michael, his eyes red. "How can you be so good? After everything I went through because of you." "Because I found that holding on to anger only hurt me. And because I learned there's power in choosing compassion, even when it's not deserved, especially when it's not deserved." After that day, Michael continued working with Susan, adjusting and improving the exoskeleton. She became one of the first success stories of his project, living proof that it was possible to create affordable and effective assistive technology. Michael's story began to spread. Journalists requested interviews. Other universities wanted to collaborate on his research. Companies offered investment to mass-produce his designs. But it was one particular invitation that changed everything. Michael received an email from the organization that ran the Science Olympiad, the same competition he had won years earlier. They were organizing a special event, bringing together winners from the last 10 years, and wanted Michael to be one of the keynote speakers. "You should go," Amber said when he told her. "Your story will inspire so many young people." "I don't know, talking about my life, about everything I went through. It's hard, I know. But think about how many boys and girls might be going through the same thing you went through. Think about the difference your story could make for them." Michael knew she was right. He accepted the invitation. The event would be held in Chicago, at a large convention center. Michael prepared his speech carefully, wanting to be honest about his struggles without glamorizing the suffering. On the day of the speech, Michael took the stage in front of hundreds of young students. He looked at the audience and saw their hopeful faces, eager for inspiration. "My name is Michael Reynolds," he began, "and I want to tell you about failure." The audience seemed surprised. This wasn't how motivational speeches usually started. "When I was 15 years old, I failed to stand up for myself. I failed to protect my mother. I failed to make the school listen to me. I failed so many times I lost count. But you know what I discovered? Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the path to it. Every time I failed, I learned something. I learned about resilience, about creativity, about how to find allies in the most unlikely places." Michael told his story. He didn't omit the difficult parts, the bullying, the suspension, his mother's firing. But he also celebrated the victories, the unexpected mentors, the friends who appeared, the discovery of his purpose. And today I have the privilege of turning the pain I lived through into something that helps other people. Every exoskeleton I build, every ramp I design, every accessibility system I develop is my way of saying, I survived, and now I'm going to use my survival to make a difference. When he finished, the audience was silent for a moment. Then everyone stood up in a deafening ovation. During the Q&A session, a girl of about 14 timidly raised her hand. "Yes?" Michael said, pointing to her. I'm also in a wheelchair, cerebral palsy, and there are some boys at my school who make fun of me. How did you manage to keep going?" Michael felt his heart tighten. He left the stage and rolled his wheelchair close to hers. "What's your name?" "Julie. Julie, I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. It's not. There will be days when you'll want to give up, days when it'll seem like cruelty is winning. But I promise you that these kids, they are not your future. They're just temporary obstacles in your path. What if I'm not as strong as you? You are strong, Julie, believe me. Anyone who endures what we endure and still wakes up every day and keeps trying, that person is the definition of strength." The girl started crying. Michael held her hand. "You'll overcome this. And one day when you're on the other side, you'll use your experience to help someone else. And that's how we turn cruelty into compassion, pain into purpose." After the event, several people approached Michael. Parents of children with disabilities, teachers wanting to know how to create more inclusive environments, and even some young people who admitted to bullying and wanted to change. It was at that moment Michael realized his mission was bigger than just developing technology. It was about changing mindsets, raising awareness, building a more inclusive world. He started getting invited to speak at schools. At each one he told his story, but always focused not just on his journey, but on how listeners could make a difference, how teachers could identify and intervene in bullying situations, how students could be allies to vulnerable classmates, how parents could teach empathy at home. During one of these talks at a school in rural Chicago, Michael noticed 4 boys sitting together in the back of the auditorium. They were quietly laughing and making comments to each other. Michael watched them while telling the story about the boys who had humiliated him in school. After the talk, to his surprise, the 4 boys approached him. One of them, a tall boy with curly hair, spoke for the group. "Mr. Michael, we wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "There's this boy in our class. He's kind of weird, you know, doesn't fit in. And we always made fun of him, made him the joke. But hearing your story, we realized we were doing to him what they did to you." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "And what are you going to do about it? We want to change, we want to apologize to him, and be better. But we don't know how." Michael spent the next half hour talking with those boys, giving practical advice about how to apologize genuinely, how to make amends, how to be better friends and classmates. When they left, Michael turned to Amber, who had watched the entire conversation. "This," she said, "is why you do what you do. You just changed at least 5 kids' lives, what they were doing to that classmate and the classmate himself." Michael smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. "I just hope nobody else has to go through what I went through to learn these lessons." The following years were a whirlwind. Michael completed his master's degree with distinction and immediately began his doctorate. His research on affordable exoskeletons gained international recognition. He was invited to present at conferences around the world, always bringing not just scientific data, but also his personal story. Nathan and Jason were also doing well. Nathan had graduated in physical therapy and worked at a rehabilitation hospital. Jason was finishing his engineering degree and already talking about doing his master's at the same university as Michael. The 3 kept in regular contact, and whenever they could, they got together. During these meetings, they sometimes talked about the old days, about how everything had changed. "You know," Nathan said during one of these gatherings, "that day at school, when we finally stood up for you against Brandon, was when I finally felt proud of myself." "For me too," Jason added. "It was like the first time I felt I was making the right choice, you know?" "And look where we've ended up," said Michael, raising his glass in a toast. "Who would have thought the worst phase of our lives would lead us here?" "To new beginnings," toasted Nathan. "And to second chances," added Jason. "And to true friendship," finished Michael. It was around this time that something extraordinary happened in Michael's life. He received an email from Tyler Johnson, the 4th boy who had taken part in the school humiliations. "Michael, I know I have no right to contact you, that I don't even deserve a reply. But I saw you in a report about assistive technology and had to write. I've changed, or at least I'm trying to change. After high school, I went to college for social work. I now work with at-risk youth, and every day I try to be the person I should have been when I was 15. But no matter how much good I try to do, I can never forget what we did to you. Brandon reached out to me last year. He told me how you helped his mother, how you chose kindness even when you had every right to be cruel. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your story, your choice to turn pain into purpose, changed my life. It made me want to be better. If you ever want to talk, I'd be honored. But if you prefer never to hear from me again, I completely understand. Tyler Johnson. Michael read and reread that email for days before responding. He talked to Amber about it, with his mother, with Nathan and Jason. Everyone had different opinions. You owe him nothing, said Amber. Whether you respond or not is completely your choice. Son, you've always been better at forgiving than I have, said Karen. Do what your heart tells you. Dude, Tyler was always the worst after Brandon, said Nathan. But if he really has changed, maybe he deserves a chance to show it, added Jason. In the end, Michael decided to respond. Tyler, I received your email and I must admit I was surprised. Of all of you, you were the one I least expected change from. I won't lie and say everything is forgiven and forgotten. The scars from that time still exist. But I've learned that people can change and that holding on to resentment only harms me. If you're really trying to be better, if you're using your past experience to help other young people, then that's admirable. I don't know if I'm ready for a friendship, but I'm willing to have a conversation. You can call me at the number below if you want to talk. Michael. 2 weeks later, Tyler called. The conversation was uncomfortable at first, full of pauses and incomplete sentences, but gradually they began to really talk. Tyler told about his journey, about how after high school he had realized he was turning into his father, a bitter and cruel man. How he had decided to radically change his path. I mainly work with at-risk teenagers, shared Tyler. Many of them are on the path to becoming bullies, and I try to show them what took me years to learn, that cruelty is a sign of weakness, not strength. That's important, said Michael. These kids need someone who understands what they've been through. I wanted to ask you a favor, not for me, but for the youth I work with. What favor? Would you come speak to them? Tell your story. I think hearing from someone who was bullied and managed to overcome it would be very powerful. Michael thought about it. It was a lot to ask, to face a group of potential bullies to talk about his most painful experience. But if it could make a difference, yes, I'll do it. 2 weeks later, Michael was in a simple community center on the outskirts of Chicago, in front of about 30 teenagers who looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Tyler introduced him. Everyone, this is Michael. He came here today to tell a story about him and about me, and I ask that you listen carefully, because what he's about to say might change your lives like it changed mine. Michael began to tell his story. He didn't soften anything. He spoke about the humiliations, about the fear, about the night spent crying, about the unfair suspension, about his mother's lost job. The young people listened in absolute silence. Some seemed uncomfortable, others were clearly moved. And this man here, Michael pointed at Tyler, was one of those who did all this to me. He was one of my bullies. Tyler nodded without trying to defend himself or minimize it. But do you know what happened years later? Michael continued. I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved the peace that comes with forgiveness. And he changed. He became a man who dedicates his life to making sure other young people don't make the same mistakes. Michael finished his talk and opened the floor for questions. At first, no one spoke. Then a skinny boy of about 15 timidly raised his hand. Sir, I bully a boy at my school. I didn't think it was a big deal, just messing around, you know. But now I understand what I must be doing to him. And what are you going to do about it? Maine asked Michael. I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to make others stop too. Other boys started speaking up, sharing their own experiences, some as bullies, others as victims. It was an honest and painful conversation, but a necessary one. In the end, all the young people made a written commitment to change their behavior. Michael had no illusions that everyone would keep it, but if at least some changed, it would be worth it. As they were leaving, Tyler pulled Michael into a hug. Thank you so much for doing this. No need to thank me. You're doing important work here. You know, I've always wanted to ask you something. What? Don't you feel angry, not even a little? At me, at Brandon, at all of us? Michael thought carefully before answering. Sometimes, yes, there are days I wake up and still feel that old pain. But then I look at the life I've built, at the people I've helped, at the difference I make, and I realize that if I hadn't gone through all that, maybe I wouldn't be here. Maybe I wouldn't have developed this passion for accessibility. So no, I don't get angry. I get grateful. Grateful for having survived. Grateful for turning that pain into purpose. Tyler discreetly wiped his eyes. You're a better man than I'll ever be. Don't say that. You chose to change. You chose to dedicate your life to helping others. That's as admirable as anything I do. It was around this time that Michael's life took another leap. He completed his doctorate and was invited to become a professor at the same university where he had studied. At just 27 years old, he would be one of the youngest professors in the biomedical engineering department. Professor Michael Reynolds, said Amber, testing the words, has a nice ring to it. You really think so? I still feel like a kid pretending to be an adult. Welcome to the club. We're all pretending. Michael started teaching and discovered that he loved teaching as much as he loved researching. His students adored him, not just for his technical competence, but for his ability to make complex concepts accessible and relevant. He always started the first day of class in a special way. Instead of talking about the course syllabus, he told his story. Why? Because he wanted his students to understand that engineering wasn't just about numbers and formulas. It was about people, about solving real problems, about making a difference. It was during his second year as a professor that something extraordinary happened. Michael was in his office when he received an unexpected call. Michael Reynolds? Yes, who's speaking? My name is Bethany Curtis. I'm the coordinator of the National Social Innovation Award. I'm calling to inform you that you've been nominated for this year's award. Michael almost dropped the phone. I was what? Nominated for your work making assistive technology accessible to low-income people. The ceremony is in Washington, D.C. next month. Can we count on your presence? Yes, of course. When he hung up, Michael sat for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. The National Social Innovation Award was one of the most prestigious recognitions in the country. He called his mother first, who cried with joy on the phone. Then Amber, who screamed so loudly he had to pull the phone away from his ear. Then Nathan and Jason, Mrs. Harriet, old Joe, everyone who had been part of his journey. Son, said Karen when she finally managed to speak through tears, your father would be so proud of you. It was rare for her to mention Michael's father, but when she did, it was always with a mix of sadness and hope that he could have been different. I didn't do this for him, Mom. I did it for you, for everyone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The next month flew by. Michael had to prepare a speech for the ceremony in case he won. He had to buy a new suit since the old one didn't fit anymore. He had to organize the trip to Washington, D.C. Amber insisted on going with him, as did Karen. To Michael's surprise, Nathan and Jason also wanted to be there. Mrs. Harriet and old Joe, now almost 80, said they wouldn't miss it for the world. On the night of the ceremony, Michael was nervous. There were 5 finalists in his category, all doing incredible work. He didn't think he had a real chance of winning. But when they announced his name as the winner, and he heard the auditorium erupt in applause, Michael realized something. He had actually done it. He had transformed the pain of his youth into something beautiful and meaningful. On stage, holding the trophy, Michael looked out at the audience. He saw his mother crying. He saw Amber smiling proudly. He saw his friends cheering. And behind them, at the back of the auditorium, he saw faces he hadn't expected. Brandon Thompson was there, with his mother Susan walking beside him, using the exoskeleton Michael had created. Tyler Johnson was there, with some of the young people from his project, and even Principal Barbara, the one who had suspended Michael so many years ago, was there. with an expression mixing regret and admiration. Michael began his acceptance speech. When I was 15, I was a broken boy. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. I saw no future for myself. All I saw was pain. But then, amazing people came into my life. Some were expected. My mother, who sacrificed everything for me. Others were surprises. Mrs. Harriet, a volunteer librarian. Old Joe, a retired carpenter. Professor Daniel, who risked his job trying to protect me. And some were the last people I would have expected. Former bullies who found the courage to change, to become allies, and eventually friends. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed I could be more than my circumstances. It belongs to everyone who taught me that compassion is stronger than cruelty. It belongs to everyone who proved that people can change. But above all, this award is for every boy or girl who is now where I was, for everyone suffering in silence, who feels invisible, who thinks they have no worth. I'm here to say, you have worth. You matter, and things can get better. I'm proof of that. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Michael stepped off the stage and was immediately surrounded by family and friends. Brandon approached, hesitant. Michael, I know we weren't invited, but when we heard about the nomination, we wanted to be here. I hope you don't mind. I don't mind, said Michael honestly. Actually, I'm glad you're here. You're part of this story too. A part we wish we could erase, said Tyler, who had joined them. But you can't, said Michael. And that's okay. The past is part of who we are. What matters is what we do with it. It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. The 4 men who had been his bullies in school knelt before him, not in humiliation, but in a genuine request for forgiveness and respect. Michael, said Brandon, his voice choked, we'll never be able to fix what we did. We'll never be able to give back the years we stole from you. But we want you to know that we spend every day trying to be better because of you, trying to make a difference to make up for, even if just a little, the pain we caused. And we forgive you for making your life a living hell, added Nathan, with tears in his eyes, even though we don't deserve it. Jason and Tyler nodded in agreement, also crying. Michael looked at those 4 men kneeling before him. Part of him still felt that old pain, those scars that would never completely disappear. But a bigger part saw not the cruel boys they had been, but the men they had become. Stand up, he said gently. You don't need to kneel before me. You've changed. You've grown. That's what matters. When they stood up, Michael hugged them one by one. It wasn't an easy or complete forgiveness, but it was genuine. It was the kind of forgiveness that frees both the forgiver and the forgiven. The rest of the night was a celebration. People Michael had helped over the years came to thank him. Students he had inspired came to tell their stories. Other people with disabilities came to share how his work had changed their lives. One woman in particular caught his attention. She was in a modern wheelchair with a child about 5 years old on her lap. Professor Michael, my name is Julie. We met a few years ago at a talk you gave. Michael looked more closely and recognized the girl who had asked how to keep going despite bullying. Julie, wow, you've grown up. Yes, she smiled. And look, I'm going to college next year, biomedical engineering, because of you. Michael felt tears burning his eyes. That's wonderful, Julie. You're going to be amazing. And those boys I told you about who bullied me. One of them became my best friend. He apologized after your talk, and now he's the person who supports me the most. It was stories like that that made everything worth it. In the following years, Michael's life continued to flourish. He and Amber got married in a simple but moving ceremony, surrounded by everyone who had been part of his journey. Nathan was his best man, and Jason gave a hilarious and touching speech about how meeting Michael had changed his life. Michael continued his work as a teacher and researcher, always focused on making assistive technology more accessible. He founded an NGO that distributed his designs for free to low-income communities. Brandon, who had finished his degree in psychology, started working with Michael on some projects, especially those focused on the psychological aspect of living with a disability. Tyler brought several of the young people from his project to intern at Michael's lab, giving them opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise had. Nathan opened his own physical therapy clinic, specializing in working with users of exoskeletons and other assistive technologies. Jason ended up becoming a professor at the same university as Michael, and they often collaborated on research. It was 3 years after receiving the National Social Innovation Award that Michael got news that would change everything again. Amber was pregnant. Michael froze when she told him. They had talked about having children, but always in an abstract future way, and now it was happening. "Are you happy?" asked Amber, nervous about his silence. "Happy? Amber, I'm terrified and thrilled and confused, and yes, very happy." The 9 months of pregnancy were a whirlwind of emotions. Michael was afraid he wouldn't be a good father because of his physical limitations, but Amber and his mother always reassured him. "Son," said Karen, "I raised you alone, working 2 shifts, with far fewer resources than you have now. And look how you turned out. You're going to be a wonderful father." When their daughter was born, a girl with big eyes and dark hair whom they named Harriet, after the librarian who had helped Michael so much, he felt a love so intense it almost overwhelmed him. Holding that tiny being in his arms, Michael made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to ensure Harriet grew up in a world kinder, more inclusive, and more compassionate than the one he had known. And he was sure he could do it, because he wasn't alone. He had a whole community of people who had learned the same lessons he had, that compassion is stronger than cruelty, that people can change, and that each of us has the power to make a difference. Years passed. Harriet grew into a bright and curious girl who loved spending time in her father's lab, asking questions about how everything worked. Michael always answered patiently, delighted by her inquisitive mind. When Harriet was 6, something extraordinary happened. Michael had been working on a new type of exoskeleton, more advanced than anything he had created before. It was lightweight, intuitive, and promised near-complete mobility for users with paralysis. With the help of Nathan, Jason, and a team of other researchers, Michael tested the equipment exhaustively. And finally, the day came to test it on himself. In the presence of his family and closest friends, Michael put on the exoskeleton. It was unlike anything he had used before. The sensors connected directly to his nervous system, reading impulses so subtle even he didn't know he was sending them. "Are you ready?" asked Nathan, who was monitoring the systems. "As ready as I'll ever be." Nathan activated the system. Michael felt a strange sensation, like tiny needles of electricity running down his legs. And then, for the first time in 25 years, he felt his legs. Not perfectly, not like before the accident, but he felt them. And when he thought about standing up, the exoskeleton responded instantly. Michael Reynolds stood up from his wheelchair. Tears immediately began to stream down the faces of everyone in the room. Karen put her hand over her mouth, sobbing. Amber held Harriet, who was jumping with excitement. Nathan, Jason, Brandon, Tyler, all were openly crying. "Daddy!" shouted Harriet. "You're standing!" Michael took one step, then another. It was strange. It required concentration, but it was possible. He was walking. He walked to his daughter and Amber and hugged them, standing up for the first time. Then he went to his mother. "Look, Mum, look what we've accomplished." Karen could barely speak through her tears. "I always knew you would do amazing things, my son. I always knew." In the following days, videos of Michael using the exoskeleton spread across the internet. The story of the boy who had been humiliated in school and had now created the technology that allowed him to walk again captured the country's imagination. But Michael didn't want the focus to be on him. He wanted it to be on all the people who could benefit from this technology. "This exoskeleton isn't for me," he said in an interview for a major TV program. "It's for every person who has lost mobility and dreams of standing up again, and we're going to make it accessible. We won't let price be a barrier." True to his word, Michael worked with government, businesses, and NGOs to make the technology available at the lowest possible cost. He refused to accept offers from international companies that wanted to buy the patent for millions, preferring to maintain control to ensure it remained affordable. 5 years later, Michael's exoskeleton was being used by thousands of people across the United States. The technology had evolved even further, becoming lighter, more efficient, more accessible. Michael was now 42 years old, a full professor at his university, author of 3 books on assistive technology, father of 2 children. Harriet was now 13, and his son Anthony was 5, named after the old carpenter who had helped Michael so many years ago. But despite all the achievements, Michael never forgot where he came from. He continued visiting schools, telling his story, encouraging young people to turn their difficulties into strength. It was during one of these visits, to a school in 3 Rivers, the same town where he had grown up, that Michael's journey came full circle. Lincoln Middle School had changed a lot since his days as a student. There were ramps everywhere, teachers trained in inclusion, strict anti-bullying policies, and in the entrance hall there was a plaque, Michael Reynolds Inclusion Center. Michael was there for the official opening of the center. By his side were his mother, now 70 years old but still vibrant, Amber, and the children, Nathan, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler, all now middle-aged men, all dedicating their lives to social causes. Mrs. Williams, 92 years old, was there in a wheelchair, still with that gentle smile. Old Joe had passed away a few years before, but his widow was present, carrying a photo of him. Professor Daniel had traveled from another city to be there, now principal of his own school, implementing inclusion policies inspired by Michael's story. Principal Barbara, retired for years, was also there. She had sought out Michael a few years back, apologizing for her inaction when he needed support the most. Michael had accepted her apology, recognizing that she too was trapped in an imperfect system. "Michael," said the current school principal, a young woman named Faith, "would you like to say a few words?" Michael went to the microphone, looking at the audience full of students, teachers, parents, and local officials. 27 years ago, he began, I was a student at this school, and this school was the place of some of the worst moments of my life, but it was also where I learned lessons that would shape who I became. I learned about resilience, about compassion, about how to find strength in unexpected places. And today, coming back here and seeing this center, seeing how this school has changed, seeing the commitment to inclusion and to protecting vulnerable students, this closes a circle in a way I never imagined possible. To all the students here today, especially those who feel different, who feel alone, who think they'll never fit in, I want to say, your difference is your power. The same things that make you feel isolated now could be what make you extraordinary later. And to those who might be tempted to bully, to humiliate, to exclude, I say, you have a choice. You can be like the boys who tormented me, or you can be like these men here. Michael pointed to Nathan, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler. These men made poor choices when they were young, but they had the courage to change. And today, they dedicate their lives to protecting others from making the same mistakes. That is true strength. That is true courage. Michael paused, emotional. This center doesn't bear my name because I'm special. It bears my name as a reminder that every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserves respect, deserves dignity, deserves the chance to reach their potential. And this school is committed to ensuring that. The audience rose in applause. Michael stepped off the stage and was immediately surrounded by students wanting to take photos, ask questions, hear more of his story. One girl in particular caught his attention. She was in a wheelchair, not unlike the one Michael had used for so many years. "Professor Michael," she said timidly, "my name is Sophia. I wanted to thank you for existing, for showing that people like me can do amazing things." Michael crouched beside her. "Sophia, you're not like me. You are you, unique and special, and I have no doubt that you will do amazing things, but they will be your amazing things, not mine. Do you think I can be a scientist like you? I think you can be anything you want. Scientist, artist, teacher, whatever your heart desires. Your chair doesn't define you, it's just a tool like my glasses or your teacher's cell phone." Sophia smiled, and Michael saw in her a reflection of himself so many years ago. But the difference was that Sophia was growing up in a different world, a world he had helped create, a world a little kinder, a little more inclusive, a little better. That evening, the whole team went to dinner at a local restaurant. It was a celebration, but also a moment of reflection. "You know," said Michael, raising his glass, None of us are here by chance. Every person at this table played a role in my journey, and I hope I've played some role in yours. You changed my life, Brandon said simply, saved me from becoming my father, and showed me that redemption is possible, added Tyler. Taught me what true friendship is, said Nathan, and showed me that kindness isn't weakness, finished Jason. You gave me my son back, said Karen, squeezing Michael's hand. Showed me the kind of man I wanted as a partner, said Amber, kissing her husband. You gave purpose to my later years, said Mrs. Williams, her voice trembling but firm. And reminded me why I became a teacher, said Daniel. Faith, Michael's daughter, who had been listening intently, asked, Daddy, do you regret it? Everything that happened when you were little? It was a deep question for a 13-year-old girl. Michael thought carefully before answering. You know, Faith, for a long time I thought I did. I wished I could go back and change everything. But now, looking back, I see that everything that happened, good or bad, led me here. Led me to you, to your mother, to this life we've built. So no, I don't regret it. I learned. And did you forgive those boys? She asked, looking at Brandon, Nathan, Jason, and Tyler. Yes, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but yes, I forgave them. Why? Because, my daughter, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Forgiving doesn't mean what they did was right. It means I refuse to let it define the rest of my life. Faith thought about that, her expression serious beyond her years. I think you're the bravest person I know, Dad. Michael felt tears burning his eyes. He pulled his daughter into a tight hug, grateful for everything he had lived through, because it had all led him to this perfect moment. But life, as Michael had learned, never stops moving. There are always new challenges, new opportunities, new purposes to discover. 2 years after that celebration in Three Rivers, Michael received a phone call that would once again change the course of his life. It was from a hospital in Chicago. Susan Thompson, Brandon's mother, had suffered a serious heart complication. She was in the ICU and the doctors weren't very hopeful. Michael dropped everything and went to the hospital. He found Brandon in the hallway, devastated, looking like he had aged 10 years since the last time they had seen each other. Michael, you didn't have to come, said Brandon, his voice hoarse from crying so much. Of course I did. How is she? Not well. Her heart. It was always weak. The stress of everything we've been through in recent years has taken its toll. Michael stayed with Brandon throughout that night. They talked about memories, about regrets, about how life is fragile and precious. If she doesn't make it, Brandon said at one point, I want you to know that her last years were her happiest. Because of you. Because of the exoskeleton that allowed her to walk again. She always said you gave her back her dignity. Brandon, don't talk like that. She'll be okay. But in the early morning, the doctors came out of the ICU with grim expressions. Susan had passed away. Michael held Brandon while he cried, thinking about how unfair life could be sometimes. Susan had been a good woman who paid for the mistakes of her son and husband, but at least her last years had been good. At the funeral, Michael was asked to speak. He talked about meeting Susan, about her grace and kindness, about how she had been one of the first users of his most advanced exoskeleton. Susan Thompson taught me something important, he said to the small crowd gathered. She taught me that it's never too late to start over. She could have given in to despair after her stroke. She could have given up. But she chose to fight. She chose to live with dignity. And in doing so, she inspired me to keep improving my work. After the funeral, Brandon sought out Michael. I don't know what I'm going to do now. My mother was all I had left for family. You have friends, Brandon. You have purpose. You're doing important work helping young people. But sometimes it feels like it's not enough, you know? Sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to make up for what can't be made up for. Michael put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. Brandon, you need to forgive yourself. I forgave you years ago. Nathan and Jason forgave you. Even Tyler, who was always the most critical, forgave you. The only one who still blames you is you. How do I forgive myself? How do I forget the horrible kid I was? You don't forget. You accept. You were that kid, yes, but you're not anymore. And every day you dedicate to helping others, Every life you touch positively is proof of that. That conversation marked a turning point for Brandon. In the following months, he delved even deeper into his work with vulnerable youth. He started a specific program to work with aggressors, teaching them to recognize and change their behavior before they caused irreparable harm. Brandon's program began to gain recognition. Schools from all over the region started implementing it, and for the first time in his life, Brandon felt he was truly making a difference. Meanwhile, Michael's life continued its upward trajectory. He was invited to join a national board on accessibility, helping to formulate public policies. His work was changing not just individual lives, but entire structures of society. It was during this period that Harriet, now 15, began to show serious interest in following in her father's footsteps. She spent hours in his lab, asking questions, helping with basic experiments, sketching ideas for improvements. "Daddy," she said one day, "I want to study biomedical engineering like you." Michael felt a mix of pride and worry. "Harriet, you know it's a tough path, right? Many years of study, a lot of hard work." "I know, but I want to make a difference like you do. I want to help people." "You can help people in many ways. You don't need to be an engineer for that." "But I want to be." "Daddy, you always taught me to use my talents to help others. I'm good at math and science. Why not use that?" Michael couldn't argue with that logic. After all, it was exactly what he himself had done. That year, something extraordinary happened. Michael was nominated for the International Technological Innovation Award, one of the most prestigious recognitions in the world in the field of assistive technology. The ceremony would be in Geneva, Switzerland, and Michael was nervous. It would be his first time outside the United States, and the idea of competing with scientists from all over the world was intimidating. "You're going to be amazing," said Amber, as she helped him pack his bags. "Your work is as good as anything they're doing out there. Better even because you focus on accessibility, not just cutting-edge technology." The trip to Geneva was a surreal experience. Michael never imagined that one day he'd be flying over the ocean, going to Europe, competing on a world stage. At the ceremony, he saw presentations of incredible technologies from all over the world: thought-controlled exoskeletons, prosthetics that could feel heat and cold, implants that restored vision. It was dazzling. When it was his turn to present, Michael spoke not only about the technology he had developed, but about the philosophy behind it. "Assistive technology shouldn't be a luxury," he said. "It shouldn't be something only the rich can access. My goal has always been to create equipment that anyone, anywhere could use, because dignity and mobility are human rights, not privileges." He showed videos of people using his exoskeletons in the United States, children taking their first steps, adults returning to work, elderly people regaining independence, and most importantly, he showed the cost, a fraction of what similar equipment cost on the international market. The audience was visibly moved. When Michael finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. That evening, during the gala dinner, Michael spoke with scientists from dozens of countries. Everyone wanted to know more about his work, about how he had managed to reduce costs without sacrificing quality. And then came the moment of the winner's announcement. "This year's winner of the International Technological Innovation Award," said the presenter, "is Professor Michael Reynolds from the United States for his pioneering work in making exoskeletons accessible to low-income populations." Michael could hardly believe it. He had won, on the world stage, against the best in the world. On stage, holding the award, he thought of everyone who had helped him get there: his mother, Mrs. Harriet, old Joe, Professor Daniel, Nathan, Jason, Brandon, Tyler. Each had played a crucial role. "This award," he said in his acceptance speech, "isn't just mine. It belongs to every American who struggles to overcome obstacles. It belongs to every person with disabilities who refuses to be defined by their limitations. It belongs to everyone who believes a better world is possible." When he returned to the United States, Michael was welcomed as a hero. There were reports in all the newspapers, interviews on television, invitations to speak at universities across the country. But what moved him most was a letter he received a few weeks later. It was from Sophia, the girl he had met at the center's opening in 3 Rivers. "Professor Michael, I saw you on television winning that international award. I cried with joy, not just because you deserved it, but because you showed me what's possible. I wanted you to know that I've been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. I'm going to study biomedical engineering, and one day I'll create things that help people like you helped me. Thank you for existing, Sophia." Michael read that letter multiple times, tears streaming down his face. This was why he did everything. For girls like Sophia, for boys like he had been, for all the people who needed someone to show them it was possible. The years kept passing. Michael published more articles, developed more technologies, touched more lives. But he never lost sight of what was important. People, not awards. Impact, not recognition. When Harriet graduated from high school as the top student in her class, Michael couldn't have been prouder. She had been accepted into the same university where he taught, in the biomedical engineering program. "Dad," she said at graduation, "I know many people will think I got in because of you, but I'll prove I'm as good as you, even better." Michael laughed, delighted by his daughter's confidence. "I have no doubt about that, my daughter. You're already better than I was at your age." Having Harriet as a student was a unique experience. Michael made sure not to give her special treatment, and Harriet appreciated that. She wanted to succeed on her own merit. During her second year at university, Harriet began working on her own project, a communication system for people with complete paralysis, using only eye movements and brain waves. It was ambitious, maybe even too much for an undergraduate student, but Michael recognized in her the same determination he had had. "You know this might not work, right?" he said when she presented the idea. "I know, but I need to try. There are so many people who can't communicate, Dad. Imagine how awful it must be to be trapped in your own mind, unable to express your thoughts." Michael couldn't argue with that. He gave her all the resources he could, connected her with other researchers, opened doors. While Harriet worked on her project, life brought another surprise for Michael. Nathan, who had become one of the most respected physical therapists in the state, received an offer to open a large rehabilitation center. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, but he needed investor partners. "Michael," he said during lunch, "I know it's a lot to ask, but would you be my partner in this? You wouldn't need to work there, just invest. With your name, we could attract other investors too." Michael thought about it. He had the money thanks to patents and awards, but more importantly, he believed in Nathan. "Of course. Count me in." The Hope Rehabilitation Center opened 2 years later, a modern complex with state-of-the-art equipment. Nathan was the director, but Jason also joined, bringing his engineering expertise to develop custom equipment. Brandon was hired as head psychologist, working with patients and their families, and Tyler organized a volunteer program that brought at-risk youth to work at the center, giving them purpose and direction. It was beautiful to see how those 4 men, who had once been his bullies, now worked together to help others. The center quickly became a reference. Patients came from all over the country for treatment, and best of all, following Michael's example, they offered free or reduced-price services to low-income families. It was at the official opening of the center that something none of them expected happened. Jason was showing the facilities when he tripped over a loose cable and fell hard. At first it seemed like just a silly fall, but when he tried to get up, he screamed in pain. He had broken his leg in 3 places. He would need surgery and months of recovery, and during that time he would be in a wheelchair himself. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Michael went to visit Jason in the hospital after the surgery. "How are you feeling?" Jason gave a bitter laugh. "I think it's karma, right? After everything we did to you, now I'm the one in this chair." "It's not karma, Jason. It was an accident, and it's temporary." "But even temporary, it's awful. I can't do half the things I used to. People look at me differently. I feel useless." Michael nodded, understanding completely. "And now you truly understand, not just theoretically, what I went through, what millions of people go through every day." "Michael, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I thought I understood, but I didn't understand anything." "I know you are. And you're going to use this experience to be a better engineer, a better friend, a better person. Sometimes life gives us these lessons in the hardest way. During Jason's months of recovery, Michael made sure to be present. He taught Jason how to navigate the world in a wheelchair, shared tricks and tips, and most importantly, offered the emotional support he himself never had when he was young. "You know," Jason said one day, "this might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." Michael raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Best thing? You broke your leg in 3 places." "I know, but it made me really understand, not just in my head but in my heart. And now when I go back to work, I'll create better equipment because I'll know exactly what's needed." And that's exactly what Jason did. When he returned to work with a new perspective, he began developing rehabilitation equipment that took into account not only technical functionality, but also the user's emotional experience. Meanwhile, Harriet had made significant progress on her communication project. She was ready to test it with real patients. The first test was with a 60-year-old man named Ernest, who had suffered a severe stroke and was completely paralyzed except for his eyes. Michael watched anxiously as Harriet set up the equipment on Ernest. It consisted of lightweight sensors on his head and an eye-tracking system. "Mr. Ernest," Harriet said gently, "I know you can hear and understand me. I'm going to ask a few questions. If the answer is yes, look up. If it's no, look down. Understood?" Ernest looked up. "Great. Now let's try the communication system. On the screen in front of you there are letters. When I activate the system, you'll be able to select letters just by looking at them. Shall we try?" What happened next was miraculous. Slowly, letter by letter, Ernest began forming words. His wife, who was by his side, began to cry when she read the first complete message. "I'm still here. Ernest." His wife held his hand. "My love, I know. I always knew." Ernest continued typing, and every word he formed was like a bridge being rebuilt between him and the world. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Harriet was crying too. Michael put his hand on his daughter's shoulder, proud beyond words. "You did it, Harriet. You gave a voice to those who couldn't speak." In the following days, other patients tested the system, all with success. Harriet had created something truly revolutionary. The story spread quickly. Journalists wanted to interview Harriet. Universities wanted to study her technology. Companies wanted to invest. But Harriet, like her father, was more interested in making a difference than in making a profit. "Dad," she said, "I want to make the project open source, so anyone can build and improve it. Are you sure? You could make a lot of money from this." "I'm sure. You always taught me that some things are more important than money. Human lives are one of them." Michael hugged his daughter tightly, realizing she had learned the most important lessons well. It was during this time that Michael received an unexpected call. It was from the president of a major American university, offering a tenured professor position with unlimited research resources. "Professor Reynolds," she said, "you could transform our department. We have the best equipment, the best students, unlimited funding." It was tempting, very tempting. But Michael thought about his life in the United States, his family, his community. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but my place is here. There is so much work to be done in the United States, so many people who need help, I can't abandon them." The president insisted, offering even more advantages, but Michael stood firm in his decision. When he told Amber, she hugged him tightly. "I won't lie, part of me was excited about the idea of an international adventure, but the bigger part is relieved. Our life is here. Our roots are here." Exactly. I didn't build all this to run away at the first sign of a better offer. That year, something significant happened in the lives of all the main characters in this story. Karen, at 75, decided to retire completely. She had worked hard her entire life and deserved to rest. Michael and Amber insisted that she move into a house next to theirs where they could take care of her. "Mom, you did everything for me when I was a child. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Mrs. Harriet passed away peacefully at 97, surrounded by everyone she loved. Her funeral was filled with people whose lives she had touched. Michael gave the eulogy, his voice breaking with emotion as he remembered the kind librarian who had changed his life. Professor Daniel retired and decided to write a book about inclusive education, using Michael's story as the central case. The book became required reading in education courses across the country. Nathan finally got married at 45 to one of the physical therapists at his clinic. He also started a training program for physical therapists, teaching not only techniques but empathy. Jason, with his experience of being temporarily in a wheelchair, became an even more passionate advocate for accessibility. He started a consulting firm that helped businesses make their spaces more inclusive. Brandon opened his own psychological care center, specializing in working with young offenders and their families. He finally forgave himself, channeling his guilt into positive action. Tyler expanded his work with at-risk youth, opening centers in several cities. He also began speaking at schools about his own past, using his story as a warning. All of them, in some way, had found redemption and purpose. All had transformed their experiences, good and bad, into something meaningful. Years continued to pass. Michael turned 50, and the university organized a special symposium in his honor. Scientists from around the world came to present work inspired by his research. During the symposium, Michael looked out at the audience and saw generations of people he had influenced, students who had become teachers, patients who had become advocates, offenders who had become allies. But the most emotional moment was when Sophia, now 28 and already a doctor of biomedical engineering, took the stage to present her latest work, an integrated system that combined communication, mobility, and environmental control for people with severe disabilities. "This work," she said, "would not have been possible without the example of my father. He taught me that engineering isn't about technology. It's about humanity. It's about looking at someone who is suffering and asking, 'How can I help?'" Michael felt his chest about to burst with pride. His daughter wasn't just following in his footsteps. He was going beyond, creating his own path, his own legacy. At the end of the symposium, there was a special presentation. On the screen, a video began playing with testimonials from people whose lives Michael had touched. Sophia, now graduated and working on her own research, spoke about how Michael had saved her life by showing her it was possible to overcome. Julie, the girl from the lecture years ago, now a confident young woman, shared how Michael's words had stopped her from giving up. Ernest, Helena's first patient, managed to record a message using the communication system, thanking both her and Michael for giving him a voice again. Dozens of other testimonials followed, each one a life changed, each one proof of the impact of choosing compassion over cruelty. But the last testimonial was the most surprising. It was Brandon, recorded recently. "Michael, I know you'll see this, and I want the world to know something. I was your worst nightmare. I did unforgivable things, but you forgave me, and by doing that you saved 2 lives, mine and my mother's. You gave me the chance to become a better person. And now, every day I wake up and try to honor that gift by being the best version of myself. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible." The video ended, and the entire auditorium rose in applause. Michael was openly crying now, as were many others in the audience. When they asked him to say a few closing words, Michael went up on stage on shaky legs, supported by his latest exoskeleton. "I don't know what to say," he began. "When I was 15, I thought my life was over. I saw only darkness ahead. But I was wrong. Life wasn't over. It just changed direction, and yes, it was painful. Yes, it was unfair, but it was also transformative. I learned that people are capable of extraordinary change. I learned that compassion is more powerful than revenge. I learned that our worth isn't in our physical abilities, but in our character. And I learned, above all, that each of us has the power to make a difference. We don't need to be geniuses. We don't need to be rich. We just need to care and take action. So, to everyone here, especially the young people, I leave this challenge. Choose kindness. Choose compassion. Choose to make a difference. Because in the end, it's not our awards or achievements that matter. It's the lives we touch. It's the love we share. The ovation was deafening. Michael came down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by his family and friends. Karen hugged him tightly. Harriet kissed his forehead. Amber held his hand. Anthony, his son, now a 19-year-old studying medicine, hugged him firmly. Nathan, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler approached together, and the 5 men embraced in a circle, crying and laughing at the same time. "Who would have thought," Nathan said between laughs and tears, "that those foolish schoolboys would end up here?" "We weren't just foolish," Jason corrected. "We were cruel, but Michael showed us a better way." "No," Michael said firmly. "You chose that path. I just opened the door. You were the ones who had the courage to walk through it." That night, they all had dinner together at a restaurant. It was more than a celebration of the symposium. It was a celebration of journeys, transformations, redemption. During dinner, Anthony, Michael's son, raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast. To my father, who taught me that true strength isn't about never falling, but always getting back up. And to all of you who proved that no one is beyond redemption. You taught me that mistakes don't define us. What we do after them is what matters." "And I'd like to make a toast," Harriet said, "to the coming generation, to the young people who are learning from our stories. May they build a world where stories like my father's no longer need to happen." The toasts continued, each person sharing what that journey meant to them. When it was Michael's turn, he stood up, leaning on his exoskeleton. "I want to toast everyone here, to those who helped me when I needed it most, to those who hurt me but later changed, to my family who are my reason for living, and to all those, known and unknown, who are fighting their own battles right now. May they find strength. May they find hope. May they never give up." Years later, when Michael was 55, he made an important decision. It was time to retire from the university and focus entirely on humanitarian work. He created the Triumph Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing free assistive technology to underserved communities throughout the United States. Harriet became the technical director, and Anthony, freshly graduated from medical school, joined as the medical director. The foundation grew quickly. Within 5 years, it had provided equipment to thousands of people. Custom wheelchairs, affordable exoskeletons, communication systems, prosthetics, all free or at nominal prices. But more important than the equipment was the emotional support. The foundation also offered psychological counseling, support groups, and mentorship programs. Brandon led this front, using his experience as a former bully to develop anti-bullying programs in schools. It was during this period that Michael received another international recognition. The Nobel Committee announced that he was among the finalists for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in promoting inclusion and dignity for people with disabilities. "Dad, you might win the Nobel," Harriet exclaimed when she found out. Michael, however, was calmer. "Maybe, but even if I don't, the work continues. Awards are nice, but changed lives are better." He didn't win the Nobel that year, but he received an honorable mention, and even that brought even more attention to his work, which meant more resources, more partnerships, more lives touched. When Michael was 60, the Triumph Foundation already had offices in 10 U.S. states and had begun expanding to other countries in Latin America. The affordable assistive technology model he had developed was being replicated globally. But of all his achievements, the one that made him most proud was seeing the next generation taking the lead. Harriet had become one of the most respected scientists in her field. Anthony was doing pioneering work in rehabilitation medicine. And Nathan's children, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler, all inspired by Michael's story, had chosen careers in social service. It was a Saturday afternoon when Michael was sitting in his garden, watching the sunset. Karen had passed away peacefully a few years before, at 82. Her absence still hurt, but Michael found comfort in knowing she had lived to see everything he had achieved. Amber sat beside him, still as beautiful at 58 as she was when they met. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About everything. About how strange life is. About how terrible moments can lead to beautiful things. Do you have any regrets?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "No, not even the bullying, because without it I wouldn't have developed this passion for accessibility. I wouldn't have met the people I met. I wouldn't have learned the lessons I learned. I wouldn't be who I am. You're an extraordinary man, you know. I'm not. I'm just someone who chose to turn pain into purpose." At that moment, Harriet arrived with her own son, a little 3-year-old boy named Gabriel. "Grandpa," the boy shouted, running to Michael. Michael picked him up, his heart melting as it always did when he saw his grandson. "Hi, champ. How was your day?" "Well, Mum took me to the lab. I saw the robot legs." Michael laughed. "They're exoskeletons, Gabriel, and one day you'll do even more amazing things." "Like you, Grandpa." "Better than me, I'm sure." Harriet sat beside them, watching father and son tenderly. "Dad, I was thinking, you should write a book. Tell your whole story." "What for? Everyone already knows it." "Not the whole story. People know the successful scientist. But they need to know the 15-year-old boy in a wheelchair, crying in the school bathroom. They need to know the full journey." Michael pondered that. "Maybe, but not now. There's still a lot of work to do." And there really was. In the following years, Michael continued tirelessly. He traveled across the United States and Latin America, setting up assistive technology centers in remote communities. He trained hundreds of technicians to maintain and repair equipment. He spoke at countless schools about inclusion and overcoming challenges. But time inevitably takes its toll. At 65, Michael began to feel his body slowing down. Not drastically, but enough to notice. He still used his exoskeleton, but needed more rest, more care. It was during this period that he received an unexpected visit. A young man of about 20 in a wheelchair appeared in his office at the foundation. "Professor Michael, my name is Derek. I'm from 3 Rivers." Michael invited the young man in, intrigued. "You studied at Lincoln Middle School, right?" asked Derek. "Yes, many years ago." "Why?" "Because I go there now. And I wanted you to know it's completely different from your time. There are ramps everywhere, trained teachers, strict anti-bullying policies, and the Michael Reynolds Inclusion Center is used every day." Michael felt tears in his eyes. "And you? How has your experience been?" "Good. I mean, there are still some idiots, there always will be, but the school doesn't tolerate it, and the other students support me. I have friends. I feel included." "That's wonderful, Derek. But I came here for another reason. I want to work at your foundation. As a volunteer, intern, whatever, I want to help others like you helped me, even without knowing me." Michael smiled broadly. "Derek, we always need passionate people. You're hired." Derek joined the team and quickly became one of the foundation's most important voices. He understood users' needs in a way no manual could teach. He moved to Chicago to be closer to work, and Michael took him under his wing as he had done with so many others over the years. It was through Derek that Michael started a special project in the final years of his active career. He returned to 3 Rivers and created a program where young people with disabilities mentored other youth, sharing experiences and coping strategies. The program was a huge success. Replicated in dozens of cities, it transformed the lives of thousands of young people. It was the perfect example of Michael's philosophy, people helping people, each using their own experiences to lift others up. When Michael was 70, the university where he had taught inaugurated the Michael Reynolds Institute for Assistive Technology, a cutting-edge research center dedicated exclusively to developing accessible solutions for people with disabilities. At the opening ceremony, Michael was surrounded by generations of people he had influenced. There were former students who were now renowned professors. There were patients who had regained their independence. There were former bullies who had become advocates. Brandon, now 72, stepped onto the stage to speak. "I shouldn't be here," he began. "I should be somewhere being a terrible person, perpetuating the cycle of cruelty I learned at home. But I'm here because a 15-year-old boy, whom I mercilessly tormented, chose compassion over revenge. Michael saved me. He didn't give me what I deserved, but what I needed, a chance to change." The audience was in absolute silence, many crying. And it wasn't just me he saved, it was my mother, who could walk again thanks to him. It was Nathan, Jason, and Tyler who found purpose. It was thousands of young people who went through our programs. It was tens of thousands who received equipment from the foundation. Michael didn't just change individual lives, he changed the world. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he slowly walked onto the stage, his hair now completely white, but his eyes still shining with that determination he always had. "I want to tell you about a boy," he began. "A boy who felt small, useless, invisible. A boy who cried alone in the school bathroom, wishing he were anyone else. That boy was me. And I'm not going to stand here and pretend that wasn't awful. It was. Every day was torture. Every humiliation left a scar. But that boy was lucky. He found people who believed in him. A mother who sacrificed everything. A kind librarian. A wise carpenter. A courageous teacher. And eventually, unlikely friends who chose to change. This institute doesn't bear my name because I'm special. It bears my name as a symbol that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of transformation. There is always the chance to turn pain into purpose. For every young person here today, every student, every researcher, every person who came to celebrate, I leave this challenge. Don't let circumstances define you. Use your experiences, good or bad, to build something greater. Be the light you needed when you were in the dark. The ovation lasted almost 10 minutes. Michael stepped down from the stage and was hugged by dozens of people, each wanting to thank him, to share how he had changed their lives. That night at home, Michael sat with Amber, Harriet, Anthony, and his grandchildren. "You know," he said, "I think I'm finally ready to write that book." "Really?" asked Harriet, surprised but happy. "Yes, it's time to tell the whole story. Not to glorify myself, but so others know it's possible to overcome, that it's worth continuing to fight." Michael spent the next 2 years writing his autobiography. It was a cathartic process, revisiting every moment of his life, from the school humiliations to the international triumphs. He omitted nothing, didn't soften the hard moments, didn't exaggerate the victories. The book, simply titled Rise Up, was published when Michael was 72. It instantly became a bestseller. Schools across the United States adopted it as required reading. Support groups used it as a basis for discussions. Families read it together. But what touched Michael the most were the letters, thousands of them, from people telling how the book had changed their lives. Bullying victims who found the strength to go on, bullies who recognized their behavior and changed, parents who learned to better support their children with disabilities. One letter in particular deeply moved him. It was from a teacher at a rural school in the countryside of Louisiana. "Professor Michael, I work at a school where inclusion was just a pretty word on paper. After reading your book, I felt inspired to change that. I secured donations, trained teachers, talked with students. Today our school has 3 students with disabilities who are thriving. And best of all, the other students don't see them as different. They're just part of the class. All of this because of your story. Thank you for sharing your pain so we could learn." At 75, Michael was officially retired, but remained active in the foundation as an advisor. He spent his days between family and volunteer work, always finding ways to continue making a difference. It was during this period that he received the news that Tyler had passed away, sudden heart attack at 77. Michael attended the funeral where he met the other 3, Nathan, Jason, and Brandon, all elders now, all carrying the weight of loss. "He was talking about you last week," Tyler's widow told Michael, "saying you saved his life, gave him purpose. He spent the last 20 years helping young people because of you." Michael felt tears streaming down his face. Tyler had come a long way from the cruel boy he'd been. At the funeral, Michael, Nathan, Jason, and Brandon carried the casket together. It was symbolic in a way none of them needed to explain. 4 men who had started on opposite sides, now united in one's final journey. "We're the last ones," Brandon said quietly after the funeral, "the 4 who tormented you, and Tyler was the first to go." "Don't say that," Michael replied. "You're not those boys anymore. Don't be defined by your worst moments. Be defined by the decades of kindness that came after." The years continued their relentless march. Nathan passed away at 79, leaving a thriving clinic and dozens of physical therapists he had trained. Jason was gone at 80, but not before seeing his innovations in rehabilitation equipment become the global standard. Brandon, the last of the four besides Michael, lived to 83. In his final days in the hospital, Michael visited him. "Michael," Brandon said, his voice weak, "I just wanted to say thank you one last time for forgiving me the chance to be better." "Brandon, you don't need to thank me. You did the work. You changed. You became a good man. But I never forgot that 15-year-old boy I tormented, and I'll carry that with me. Then carry this too. You were forgiven long ago, and you redeemed yourself thousands of times." Brandon died that night, with Michael holding his hand. It was peaceful, painless, and Michael felt that a chapter of his life had finally closed completely. At 80 years old, Michael was the last of the main characters from his youth story still alive. Mrs. Harriet had passed decades ago. Old Joe, too. Professor Daniel had died a few years earlier. His mother had been resting for over a decade. But life continues through generations. Harriet was now 52 and dean of the university where Michael had taught. Anthony, at 49, was director of a major rehabilitation hospital. Michael's grandchildren were young adults, all working in fields that helped others. And the work Michael had started not only continued, but thrived. The Triumph Foundation was present in 12 countries. The Michael Reynolds Institute had produced hundreds of patents. The affordable assistive technology model he developed was being used globally. It was on his 80th birthday that the family organized a surprise. Michael thought it would just be an intimate dinner, but when he arrived at the venue, he found hundreds of people. They were people from his entire life, former students, former patients, researchers who had been inspired by his work, young people who had read his book and changed their paths. Derek, now executive director of the foundation, was the master of ceremonies. "Professor Michael," he said, "we're here today not just to celebrate 80 years of your life, but to celebrate the impact of those 8 decades. You've touched millions of lives, changed policies, transformed mindsets. And above all, it proved that kindness and compassion are forces more powerful than any technology." One by one, people took the stage to share their stories, how Michael had changed their lives, how his story had inspired them, how his inventions had given them independence. But the most moving speech came from Gabriel, his great-grandson, the son of Harriet, now a young man of 23. "Great-grandpa," he said, "I grew up hearing your stories, about the boy who was humiliated, about how you turned that pain into purpose, and that taught me the most important lesson of my life. Our circumstances don't define us. Our choices define us. I, too, have chosen to follow in your footsteps. I'm finishing my degree in biomedical engineering, and you know why? Because you taught me that there are things more important than money or fame. There are lives to be touched. There's a difference to be made. So thank you, Great-Grandpa, for existing, for fighting, for never giving up, and for showing us how to live." Michael was openly crying now. He looked around at that crowd of faces, each representing a life touched, a story changed, and he realized that it had all been worth it. Every tear, every humiliation, every obstacle, everything had led to this moment. When they asked him to speak, Michael slowly stood up. At 80 years old, he still wore his exoskeleton, now so advanced it was almost unnoticeable. He walked to the stage, with legs still somewhat stiff but steady. "I don't know how to thank you," he began, his voice still strong despite his age, "for this celebration, for your kind words, for everything you represent. When I look at everyone here, I see not just what I have done, but what we have all done together, all. Because no achievement is individual. Everything I accomplished was because of people who supported me, inspired me, challenged me. And now, seeing the next generation taking up the work, I see that the legacy isn't in me. It's in each of you. Every life you touch, every moment of kindness you choose, every time you choose compassion over cruelty. I don't know how much time I have left. 80 years is a long life. But no matter when I go, I know the work will continue. Because you are here, you understand, and you will carry the torch forward. So my final challenge to all of you is this: keep choosing kindness, Keep building bridges. Keep believing that people can change. Keep making a difference, because that's how we change the world, one life at a time." The applause was deafening. Michael stepped down from the stage and was surrounded by his family. Harriet hugged him tightly. Old Joe kissed his forehead. Amber, at 78 and still by his side, held his hand. "I love you," she whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you," replied Michael. "Thank you for making my life complete." That night, when they were finally alone at home, Michael and Amber sat together in comfortable silence. They didn't need words. 50 years together had created an understanding that went beyond language. Michael thought about his life, about the entire journey from that scared, humiliated boy to the man he was now. It had been an unbelievable journey, full of pain but also indescribable joy, and he realized something fundamental. He wouldn't change a thing, because every moment, good or bad, had been necessary to bring him here, to make him who he was, to allow him to touch so many lives. "Are you happy?" asked Amber. Michael thought carefully before answering. "Happy isn't the right word. I'm at peace. I'm grateful. I'm complete. I've lived a life with purpose. I've loved and been loved. I've made a difference." What more could anyone ask for? 3 years later, at 83 years old, Michael began to feel his body really slowing down. It wasn't anything dramatic, just the natural weight of the years. He spent more time at home, surrounded by family, but still closely followed the Foundation's work. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Michael woke up, feeling that something was different. It wasn't pain, it was just a sense of completeness, as if his work here was done. He called Amber, Harriet, Anthony, and all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They all came quickly, sensing something important was happening. "I just wanted you all here," said Michael, his voice still clear, "to tell you that I love each one of you and that I'm proud of what we built together." "Dad, don't talk like that," said Harriet, tears already streaming. "You still have many years ahead. Perhaps, or perhaps not. But either way, I need you to know that I'm at peace. I've lived a full life. I have no regrets. And I know the work is in good hands." They spent the day together, sharing memories, laughing, crying, celebrating a life well lived. Michael told stories of his childhood, of his mother, of Mrs. Williams and old Joe, of Professor Daniel. He spoke about Brandon, Nathan, Jason, and Tyler, about how even former enemies can become allies. The most important lesson, he told the great-grandchildren, is that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to choose kindness. And it's always worth forgiving, not for others, but for yourself. When evening came, Michael was tired but happy. He kissed each family member, holding each one for an extra moment, memorizing their faces, their hugs. That night, Michael fell asleep beside Amber, as he had done for 53 years. And in his sleep, he dreamed of all the people he had loved. He saw his mother, young and smiling. He saw Mrs. Williams in the library. He saw old Joe in his workshop. He saw Professor Daniel in his classroom. He saw Nathan, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler, not as the bullies they had been, but as the good men they became. Michael Reynolds passed away peacefully during the night, at 83 years old, surrounded by his family's love. The funeral was immense. Thousands of people attended, from across the United States and abroad. There were dignitaries, scientists, students, people using his exoskeletons, young people who had been inspired by his story. Harriet gave the eulogy, her voice steady despite the tears. "My father always said his life truly began at 15, when he was at rock bottom, because it was there, in that darkest moment, that he discovered his true strength. He taught us that pain can be transformed into purpose, that tragedy can be converted into triumph, that even the worst moments can lead to beautiful things. But above all, he taught us about forgiveness. Not easy forgiveness, but the true forgiveness that frees both the forgiver and the forgiven. Daddy, you lived as you taught, with kindness, with compassion, with purpose, and now your mission is ours, to keep building the better world you dreamed of." The burial was in 3 Rivers, in the town where it all began, beside the grave of Karen, his mother. Not far from where Mrs. Williams and old Joe rested, and near the graves of Nathan, Jason, Brandon, and Tyler, it was fitting that they all rested together, united in life and now in eternity. In the days following the funeral, the world media extensively covered Michael's passing. Articles were written celebrating his contributions, documentaries were announced, biographical books were planned. But Michael's true legacy wasn't in articles or documentaries. It was in every person wearing one of his exoskeletons and walking with dignity. It was in every school that implemented anti-bullying policies inspired by his story. It was in every young person who chose kindness over cruelty because they read his book. It was in Harriet and Anthony, continuing his work. In Gabriel, his great-grandson, developing the next generation of assistive technology. In Derek and thousands of others who had been touched by his compassion. 5 years after his departure, the Triumph Foundation inaugurated the Michael Reynolds Memorial, an interactive museum telling his story and celebrating the work of inclusion and accessibility. The museum became a destination for schools from across the country, inspiring new generations. And each year, on Michael's birthday, the foundation organized Compassion Day, when thousands of people performed acts of kindness in his honor. It was their way of keeping alive not the man, but the values he represented. The story of Michael Reynolds, the boy who was humiliated and became an icon of triumph and compassion, continued to inspire generations. Not because it was a perfect story, but because it was real, because it showed that it's possible to transform pain into purpose, that people can change, that kindness is stronger than cruelty, and that in the end, what matters isn't the years we live, but the lives we touch. And Michael had touched millions. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story. Do you believe Michael made the right decision in forgiving those who hurt him? Where are you following us from? If this story touched your heart, or if you know someone who went through something similar, share in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel.